it's 6 o'clock. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Goffstown Budget Committee. We're going to get started with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's get started with a roll call. Samantha.
Samantha Kearns.
Olivia Welch-Erdahl.
Doug Pounds.
Brian Mazer.
Jared Talbot, School Board Rep.
Joe Alexander.
Frank Hobbs.
Kelly Boyer, Select Board Rep.
Israel Carey.
Peter Grigorikakis.
Laura Stevens.
Allison DeCesare.
Richard Manzo.
Mark Bernard, Village Water Precinct.
Okay, and we're joined here, Scott Burgos, Brian Balke here for staff support. There's administrators in the room. We also have Derek Horn. Oh, no, he came and left, so I think.
He's in the back. He's
Oh.
way in the back.
Oh,
Yeah.
he's not in the hot seat tonight, so he's out back, but he's here. Okay, so first thing on the agenda is public comment. Is there any,
Can I do a point of order first?
go ahead.
Or, I don't know if that's what it's called. So if there is public comment and there's like something specific or a question, can the committee speak to it or not at all?
I believe in the rules of order, we changed it, so if you'd like to
Okay, I just
comment.
wanted to make sure that's what.
Yeah, as long as it's respectful,
Yeah,
go
sure.
right ahead. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, is there anyone here from the public that wishes to comment tonight? Hey, come on down. Just introduce yourself and what street you live on.
Okay.
Here?
Yes.
So my name is Mary Grassett. I actually live in Bedford, but I am the president of the Goffstown Education Association. And I would like to read a letter that I wrote for the Budget Committee. Dear members of the Budget Committee, I am writing to express my strong support for maintaining the position of Dean of Students at Mountain View Middle School. This role is crucial for the effective supervision and discipline of our students, and its elimination would have significant negative impacts on our school community. The Dean of Students plays a vital role in ensuring a safe and orderly environment conducive to learning. By overseeing student behavior and implementing disciplinary measures, the Dean helps to maintain a positive school climate. This not only supports academic achievement, but also fosters social and emotional development among students. Currently, my 8th grade team has had more student suspensions to date than we have had during the entire school year last year. This alarming trend highlights the urgent need for a dedicated Dean of Students to address behavioral issues promptly and effectively. The current group of students often lack manners, have no issues talking back to adults and arguing with them, and display a sense of entitlement. Their poor work ethic is evident as they frequently break school policy by copying others' work, for example. Additionally, students often come late to class due to wandering the halls. Their hallway behavior includes yelling, pushing, shoving, throwing objects, and engaging in inappropriate physical contact. Students are often written up for the destruction of school supplies and property, especially the boys' bathroom. I don't know why. It's always the boys' bathroom. These disruptive behaviors not only affect the learning environment, but also pose safety concerns for all students and staff. If this position is eliminated, teachers will spend a huge amount of their time dealing with student behavior, cutting into valuable educational time. Substitutes have told me personally they will not work at Mountain View, and some no longer work at Mountain View due to student behavior. Teachers have informed me that they will leave the district if the position is cut, and Goffstown will have even more trouble recruiting well-qualified teachers. Moreover, the Dean of Students serves as a key liaison between students, teachers, and parents. This position facilitates communication and collaboration, addressing student issues promptly and effectively. The Dean's presence ensures that students receive the guidance and support they need to succeed both academically and personally. The Dean of Students is also responsible for supervising students who are sent to the office or given in-school suspensions. If this position is cut, who will fill this important part of the job? Without a dedicated individual to manage these responsibilities, the safety and order of our school will be compromised. If this position is cut, students will not be safe because no one will be solely responsible for making sure the rules, policies, and boundaries are consistent and followed throughout the building. This lack of oversight could lead to a chaotic and unsafe environment, undermining the educational mission of our school. Eliminating this position would place an undue burden on teachers and administrators who are already stretched thin with their existing responsibilities. Without a dedicated dean of students, the quality of supervision and discipline would likely decline, leading to increased behavioral issues and a less supportive learning environment. The dean of students is an indispensable part of our middle school. As the president of the Goffstown Education Association, I urge the Budget Committee to consider the long-term benefits of retaining this position and to recognize its importance in fostering a safe, supportive, and effective educational environment. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
What?
Thank you for your
Oh,
comment.
okay.
Anybody else here for public comment? Come on up, Henry.
Thank you and good evening. I want to talk a little bit about money and budget real quick.
Just introduce yourself.
I'm sorry.
And street you live on.
Henry Geisen, Amoskeag Drive, Goffstown. So, in 2024, we saw an inflation rate of 2.7%. 2023, 4.1%. 2022, 8%. We're seeing a draft of the budget that increases our expenditures by 12.5%. That supersedes all except for the highest 2 years of inflation. Now, what does this mean for us in the field? When I bought my retirement house 4 years ago, my taxes were just over $8,000 a year. They're now almost $13,000 a year. That is a 50% increase. The relay of that is almost $400 a month. Now, I'm retired on a fixed income, some of you know me. You start doing the math on that, and you have to wonder how many people we're pricing out of our town. When I was visiting Medville, I had the same questions over and over again, and they live largely in modular prefab houses on small lots, and the retired community is saying that they're getting priced out. To have a budget that comes across at that 12.5%, when I'm reading these numbers off of national finances, the inflation rate, it's not viable. We are pricing our neighbors out of this town. We have to start figuring out where to make real cuts. We have to start figuring out what real necessities are versus what we want. Because when we price people out of this town, it's not going to matter how many nice things we can offer the neighbors. We are going to lose the neighbors. You buy a house if you're an investor with the intention of gaining value. Right now, people are, when you buy a house to live in, you want to live there, die there, retire there, etc. My tax rate is higher than my mortgage. I can never pay off my house and just live there without paying an equivalent amount to my mortgage simply in property taxes. The buck's got to stop somewhere. 2 years ago, people came to this body and they asked for consideration, and somebody actually started crying. Last year, people got angry and they asked for a tax cap and they got mocked. We need to make some changes, and I'm looking to you and to the select board to be the front line in those changes before we lose this town. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Representative.
Do you mind if I ask one question?
Go ahead.
Henry.
Henry, you have a question?
Peter.
Yes.
Do you mind if I think you bring up a really good point, but, and you don't have to answer this question now, but we're going to have to be talking about those things and those hard conversations. You said like nice things, as opposed to necessities. If you can think of anything that's like a nice thing, and I'm not being facetious at all, I'm being very direct. Like if you can think of a thing that's just like a nice thing that we're paying for, like, let us know, because we're going to start deliberating on this town budget very soon.
I can give you two examples off the top, one that we've already done that we're paying for now and one that we almost did. The first example is we divested in the Quince to bring in a tower. The tower costed a lot of money. Then we had to build a firehouse for the tower. The only viable building that can use that tower is on St. Anselm's. The tower is located downtown. The closest tower to St. Anselm's is actually Manchester West. We have 2 rotaries that tower would have to get through. In doing that, we lost firefighting apparatus in exchange for some rescue apparatus that prudently we will never use. In about the same time frame, the decision was made not to upgrade and renovate Terrell Hill Fire Department. In the past 3 years, there have been 4 total lost fires out there. There is not apparatus that can respond there in a timely fashion. So we've made the town less safe by investing in a bigger truck and a new fire department. The one that we had a near miss on, instead of having estimates and talks about renovating the pool, they wanted they wanted a $350,000 estimate on a project that would have yielded a $6.5 million bond to renovate the park. To my knowledge, the pool's still not fixed because the estimate on the park was shot down. But that park was going to be a massive project that would have fixed the pool, but was absolutely unnecessary and would have driven up taxes. $6 million bond plus interest over the course of the next 30 years is going to be reflected on the taxpayer. So those are 2 examples that I can give you, sir.
Thank you.
Quickly, Laura.
And just, I just want to clarify, that the pool project specifically, because that was so recent, went to the voters as not recommended by Budget Committee, is
Yes.
that correct?
Okay, but thank you for that.
And, yeah, no,
No,
I just
thank you
wanted
for
to-
that.
Yep,
Thank you, Henry.
thank you.
Is there anyone else here for public comment? Karen, come on up.
Karen Banowski, Rochambeau Street. Thank you for letting me speak. I'm a senior in town. I'm retired. I've lived here for 28 years, raised my family here, and it's been a very good life here. I haven't really used, excuse me, town services except for fire, police kind of thing, and I'm discovering that there are services out there. So I think the thing that I would want the board to consider is that there are needs and then there are wants. And the needs right now need to take the priority for us to keep the rate of increase down. And because the vote that happened in March and showed that people really are concerned about the budgets. And I'm glad to hear people responding to that here. I'm really glad to hear that. So I think the board needs to look at what do we really have to have in a town. We need to have order. We need to have, we need police officers and we need firefighters. And we're educating our kids, so we need schools. Above and beyond that, what else do we have to have? We have a library, and it's a beautiful library, and it's award-winning, but we also have people using the internet who can get things that they don't need to go to the library to do that. So these are things that I'm thinking of because I know that the library has come before the citizens and has asked for increases in space, and a new building, all of that. And the other thing is our Parks and Rec. I don't know what they actually do, and I guess that's my fault. But as far as, I don't know anyone in my neighborhood who uses Parks and Recs. I live in Bernardville, and I've never used the services. I go to the Y, so, again, that's a want versus a need, at least from where I'm viewing. So thank you for listening.
Thank you for your comments, Karen.
Thank you.
Anyone else here? Come on up.
Tim Searles, 311 Toronto Road. Basically here to represent 3 households, 6 voters, eligible voters. If a 12.5% tax increase comes to us, we're not voting for it. I just want to make that clear. And I just would appreciate any consideration at either decreasing or eliminating the increase, because I'm in the same boat. My taxes have now exceeded my mortgage, so I just think I'm sure there's some fat on the pig, so to speak, that can be traded. So that's all I got.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Sorry, can I ask a question?
Go ahead. Tim, will you
Can I ask you a quick
answer
question? Thank you for coming, by the way, seriously.
Yeah.
Where did you hear about a 12.5% tax increase, by the way? I don't
Through
know,
the
I
grapevine.
hope this board doesn't want to do that.
Through the grapevine.
If I might, I think the budget might increase 12%, but that doesn't necessarily mean your taxes would increase 12%.
So any 12.5% increase, whether it's on the taxes or the budget, we will not be voting for.
Right, I just want you
Right.
to know that it doesn't necessarily,
I might have
If-
gotten the wording mixed
yeah,
up.
I just wanted you to know
Yeah,
that.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so that's all it was just wording.
Yeah.
Okay.
Whatever increases, we're not voting.
I mean, I don't want to spend 12.5% on
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Oh, was that? He's good.
All right, anyone else here for public comment? I'll get a sheet next time. Perfect, so with that, I'm gonna close public comment. Next on, do you have something?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Because I think Samantha brings up a good point, and I'm sure there are people watching at home tonight, for people are here. Can someone other than myself explain just the brief sort of difference between the tax rate and how that comes about versus the percent increase? And I understand, because we hear that at this table for sure, like, we aren't looking for any high percent in anything either. But just the difference in those things, so the people understand how they connect. Can you give one?
Is there somebody that would like to explain that?
figured
mean, I
as-
don't know,
I
like-
figured as chair, you could
I don't know why you're
just,
putting me on the spot about it.
I just, because you're chair, I mean,
ahead.
someone else is welcome to.
Samantha, go ahead.
So, I can't answer this question for you today, but I know that when I went to the budget conference put on by the
Yes.
New Hampshire Municipal Association, they talked about how the tax rate is equivalent across, like it is an equal spread across households. It's based off of the evaluation of your house. On Tuesday, I can provide like a little bit more explanation on it because they have a beautiful slide. Unless someone else wants to elaborate on that a little more. Kelly has her hand raised.
Go ahead, Kelly.
Yeah, I can do it. So
Thank you, Kelly.
I think what you're talking about in particular is the budget versus what we collect in taxes, so our offsetting revenue in town, which are things that are made up, our fees from, I think we just talked about some of those, summer camp, the transfer station, vehicle registration, dog registration, things like that, as well as any other grants or anything that we bring to the table from state and federal funding as well. And those things offset, our offsetting revenue is then makes up the amount that we have to collect through taxation. And so I think, is that what you were
That's part
kind of
it,
asking?
yeah, I
Okay.
wanted to make sure,
And then
I
the-
knew there's someone better than me to
the-
answer the full question.
The tax rate itself is made up of our municipal tax collection, our school tax collection, state education, and county tax as well. So that's what you see on your tax bill broken out.
Thank you.
Okay, so next on the agenda is approval of minutes. I'm going to table that till the next meeting. I haven't received that. Did you have- okay. And then, so we're moving into, we have 3 things on our agenda today. We have Grassmere Village Water Precinct, Goffstown Village Water Precinct, and the school budget. So I see a lot of administrators in the room. I know that there's a 7 o'clock event going on in the theater. So we're going to do our best to work around that. But the first thing on the agenda, I want to call on Grassmere Village Water Precinct. allow you guys the opportunity to present so you can enjoy the rest of your evening.
Okay, well, I have a 7 o'clock meeting I need to go to too. Can I call Bruce on the, because Bruce is not able to be here, can I call him on
Sure.
the phone right now?
Sure.
Okay. Bruce. He goes. Okay.
Tina, that's okay. If you can't get a hold of him, just do your best.
Okay, well, first of all, to assure everybody, this does not impact anybody's tax rate. We are a nonprofit, and we are a distributor of water, so this has nothing to do with anybody's. Bruce Rand. Oh, this is Bruce. Okay. Okay, Bruce, are you there?
Yeah, I was just out.
Okay. I have you on speaker.
Okay,
And,
good.
but you're very faint. Okay, can you hear? I can hardly hear you.
I'm just walking out of the bathroom. Let me just get to the living.
So, anyway, we're
Okay.
we're a wholesaler of water, and we have about 220 customers in the Grassmere section of Goffstown. Right now, our budget changes for 2025 are as follows. We have a salary line that's increasing from $82,000 to $386 to $85,616, which is a 3.9% increase, and that's because Manchester this year actually only went up 3%. And the last, except for COVID years, they've gone up 9% in the past few years. They've had some pretty drastic increases. Because we are a distributor, we have to follow their increases. So this year, we only went up 3%. And our rate starts on October 1st. Now, there's a possible construction of a condominium on Mast Road over by the Shell station. That was approved. It's approved by the planning board, but we don't know if and when it will be built. So we don't know if it'll be this coming year, if it starts in the spring. We contract with Manchester for water, but it won't be a full year of water with them, so we don't know what the nature of their consumption's gonna be. Then the only other thing that we have here is our office supplies line increased by $1,300. We added a postal line, as we purchase our envelopes are purchased with the postal stamps from the US Postal Service. And then the fourth thing that changed was our communication line will be added with an upgrade of an alarm system to our pump house on Juniper Drive, which will now cover the exterior doors, the electric system, and the pump operation. And I think everybody here, Catherine Fisher must have distributed the budget to you guys. And that's my presentation. So if any of you have any questions about it.
Questions for Tina? The only comment I have is that I would request that somebody from Grassmere Village Water Precinct become a permanent member of this committee,
Okay.
so that we can use them towards a quorum.
Okay.
So we ask that every year. I'm just going to continue to ask that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. That's it.
Okay. All right, so. Do you want to go now? I'm gonna wait, I'm gonna hold off on the Village Water Precinct till 7 o'clock to try to make sure that the administrators are here as much as possible. So Brian, I'm gonna call on you.
Okay, great, thank you, Joe. Mr. Gross? So we're gonna send around some packets of information. I have 2 packets for the committee this evening. The first is a rather large set of job descriptions. One of the requests we had was for job descriptions of administration, so we have copies of all of those. So I'm going to send those around, one direction to Mr. Talbot and one direction to Mr. Mazur. Mr. Gross is sending around a handout.
It's the presentation, that's the PowerPoint, so.
I would share for folks at home, this presentation has been posted on the website, so anyone who's so inclined can follow along.
I requested it, I don't know if he actually was able to put it up. If not, it'll be definitely tomorrow morning, Brian, so just wanted you to know.
Okay. Okay, so, thank you. I appreciate the chance to share some additional information with the Budget Committee. So I'm going to go through this fairly quickly, Joe, and I have my administrative team here. They're here to be able to answer any questions. I wanted to have the opportunity, if there are any questions about roles that administrators play, my administrators are in the room. So if we have questions, I'm going to call on them to come up and speak. But before I get to that, let me share a little additional information with the Budget Committee. I would be remiss if I did not begin by sharing our cost per pupil information. So unlike the municipal side of things, unlike the town, you can compare every school district cost on every metric across the state. So our elementary cost per pupil is the fourth lowest out of 155 school districts. It's over $4,000 less than the per pupil average that the state has. Mountain View Middle School is the third lowest out of 61 middle schools, almost $3,600 less than the state average. And Goffstown High School is the fifth lowest out of 73 school districts, $3,417 less than the state average. When you look at our K through 12 system, we are the lowest per pupil cost of any K to 12 system in the entire state. So when you look at, are we spending money prudently in the Goffstown School District, I submit to you that you don't have the lowest per pupil cost across all K to 12 systems unless your superintendent is a fiscal conservative and we are spending money wisely. So I'd like to just begin and preface that. The next piece is the next slide in the handout. Let's talk about state aid. And I promise I won't go too far down this rabbit hole, but I would be remiss if I did not point out to the Budget Committee that the way that we pay for our public schools in this state is fundamentally broken. And unfortunately, the taxpayers in every municipality in the state continues to pay the burden. They pay the overwhelming cost of public education, which is a state obligation under the state's constitution. The state continues to not provide an adequate education. There have been multiple lawsuits, so my issue is you may not have an issue with the cost, but you have an issue with us raising the money for taxation. I don't disagree. I don't disagree. But that is not the obligation and the burden on the school district. We are providing an exceptional service at one of the lowest price for all K-12 systems. Our state aid, if you look at 20 years ago, base adequacy for the statewide educational property tax was $3,390. Now it's $4,182. In 20 years, it went up less than $1,000. Base adequacy increased $792 or $40 a year. So I won't belabor this too much, but this is what it is, and this is the problem. It's not how much money we're spending on kids or administration, it's how we fund the system. Public education is a good for all of our citizens, all of our towns, and all of our kids, and it's essential. All right, thank you for allowing me to do that. One more piece I would share is if you didn't see this week, the Conval lawsuit was argued in front of the Supreme Court. In all likelihood, we won't know until next year what's going to become of that, but I want to let everyone know what could happen. Right now, your property taxes pay for this much of education, and SWEPT pays for this much. We could flip it. So if the state now is responsible for more, it may just increase SWEPT and bring down the lower burden, but your tax bill may not change. So just be aware that even if Conval wins, it may not mean that there's any relief on property taxes. It's a $500 million problem in New Hampshire, and it's being decided by 3 justices. 3 people are going to make this decision with 2 empty seats sitting on the bench. That's a problem. Okay, I'm better. Thank you for allowing me to do that. My blood pressure will now come down. I think it might have been Mr. Mazur asked for an org chart. So we provided that to you. So in your packet, I'm going to go through and explain a little bit. If you have any questions as I go, please ask me, and I will defer to the administrators in the room. So for Glen Lake School, you can see on the handout oversight of a $2.9 million budget, 200 students in pre-K through kindergarten, 15.4 teachers, and there are extensive home visits, para-educators, and over 360 IEP meetings for young children.
And Brian, I should clarify, when you see that number 261 in parentheses, that is an administrator who works year-round. They have to work, it's a 261-day contract. And the other one, you'll see the facilitator is a 220 days in parentheses. That means that they work 220 contractual days. And we do have folks that are on different contracts for different days.
Thank you, Scott.
Okay.
At Bartlett, continuing on, so same rationale for the 261 and the 220. Principal oversight of a $3.6 million budget. There are the student numbers, there are the staff numbers. I would also share that the assistant principal at Bartlett also has district-wide oversight for the Title I program. So historically, the assistant principals at both Glen Lake School and Bartlett were part-time. It was one position split between two entities. That wasn't working for us. We had a number of shortcomings, and we decided to increase that, and I'm going to talk about more when I get to one of my later slides, when I talk about succession planning. But there's also oversight of district-wide programs. Maple Avenue, you can see 512 students, $6.7 million budget. We have two other administrators. We have an assistant principal who acts as our special education facilitator, and we have a dean of students. You can see that the principal and assistant principal are 261 days. The dean of students is just over the regular school year for a 200-day contract. Mountain View Middle School, $12.6 million budget, almost 900 kids. There's 77 professional staff, nurses, and you can see we have multiple administrators, assistant principal, curriculum coordinator, special education facilitator, and dean of students. You'll see a similar structural setup at Goffstown High School. So some school districts have a principal and then several assistant principals. We have roles that are slightly different. So we allow for the assistant principal as kind of a generalist, but the curriculum coordinator is someone who specializes in teaching and learning, development and oversight of curriculum, district-wide assessments, a lot of those kinds of things. Your special education facilitator oversees all of the special education programming in the building, and the dean of students exclusively does student management. Mr. Lacasse is here, and he's happy to talk to the committee and answer any questions that people may have. Goffstown High School, slightly larger operation, similar structural arrangement with the addition of a couple of positions that I'll highlight. We have an athletic director, and as you can see on here, we have 44 teams at Goffstown High School, 47 paid coaches, 36 volunteer coaches, 400 student athletes, and by the way, a lot of those play multiple sports. So these are kids that are taking multiple seasons. And we have a number of volunteer coaches as well. At the middle school, 22 teams and same arrangement. The positions that we have at Goffstown High School also includes a guidance director. That is a required position on the minimum standards based on the number of kids that we have on the size of the school. So that's a required position. And lastly, we have a part-time adult ed director. That's for continuing education, people who want to come back and maybe get their high set or their what used to be called the GED, take continuing education classes, etc. The next slide shows a couple of other district-wide positions. The first is a district behavioral intervention facilitator. What in the world is that? I'm going to talk more about what that means, and that individual is in the room this evening if anyone has questions. We have a facility supervisor overseeing our custodians, and we have a food service director who feeds all of our kids across all of our schools, and Mrs. Bizzaro is here as well. If I keep going, I'd like to explain a little more about the behavioral facilitator, because I know that this was a question that people were asking. What is a BCBA, what is an RBT, and how does that interface with the deans of students? So let me talk a little bit about this. The BCBA is a board-certified behavioral analyst, and an RBT is a registered behavioral technician. These are specialized IEP, individualized education plan services for children who have educational disabilities. So these are plans that are mandated by law. I would be remiss if I didn't point out that in 1975, the federal government passed the law which established special education. At that time, the federal government told us they were going to pay 40% of the cost. Guess what? That never happened. So in 1975, the promise was 40% of the cost. It never happened, and that cost has continued to be borne at the local level, unfortunately. So these services provide in-district programming to avoid costly out-of-district placements. They specialize in students with autism, developing behavioral programming, conducting behavioral assessments, and conducting data and documenting student progress. So this position, if you look at the next slide, this position was created as a non-union position for fiscal year '25. This position cannot be a teacher because it's required to supervise and evaluate these registered behavioral technicians. And if you look here, I'm providing you with the last 3 fiscal years of what we paid for a contracted service. In fiscal year '22, we spent $161,000. Fiscal year '23, $168,000. Fiscal year '24, $179,000. Tell me when you see the trend of increasing costs. Look at FY '25. We changed that program and we're able to provide those same services for $129,000. And in addition, we are now eligible to be able to bill for what's called the Medicaid to Schools program, which we anticipate another $10,000 to $30,000 of revenue that we can now bill for because we have an in-house board-certified behavioral analyst. So this is not a traditional administrative position in the sense that they're running staff meetings and evaluating teachers. These are specialized IEP services for some of our most needy students. If I keep going, I wanted to provide a couple of reports that I think share information that is important for the committee to know. These are all reports on the New Hampshire Education Department website. I didn't want to come in and provide my own data because you might say, well, Brian, how do we know your data is accurate? So I'm going to use the state data. So the state has identified in fiscal year '24, we had a number of habitually truant students. Goffstown High School, 72, Mountain View, 56, Maple Ave, 47, Bartlett, 24. Administrators support these kids and their families to get them to school, to work with kids, and to help support them in their learning. The other thing at the bottom, and I'm not proud of this, but this is the reality, so I think we have to be honest about it. We have had 98 incidents of violence during last school year in our schools. That puts us in the top 25% of New Hampshire schools. If you cut administrators, that's going to get worse. That means teachers have less support dealing with children who have significant issues. The next page. The state tracks how much every school district spends on administrative costs. You can see I've provided that for you from FY '20 to FY '23. It's holding it just over 10%. Goffstown this year is at 10.4%, and that puts us in the middle 50% of New Hampshire school districts. We are not overstaffed with administration. Other factors for administration. We oversee and implement 2 union contracts, 432 school board policies. If I brought the binder to you for effect, it's this thick. That's how many policies the people in the back of the room have to know, understand, and be able to implement, on top of countless federal, local laws, regulations. It goes on and on. The complexity of what the administration has to know and be able to do is significant. And the whole point of it is to allow teachers to teach. We want to allow teachers to teach. The bottom of this page shows the number of injuries that we've had from children. These are calendar year numbers. Calendar year '22, we had 43 incidents where we had staff that were hurt by children. In 2023, 40. But look at FY '24, calendar year '24, 66. That's a significant increase. I want the committee to understand, if you have not been in a public school in a while, it looks different than you might remember. It looks different. The children, their needs, how they've been parented, how their brains have changed because the technology that they've been exposed to, it's significant. I asked if it was okay for me to share this. Lisa Johnson, who's in the back of the room, our wonderful assistant principal at Maple Ave, had her ankle broken this year during an incident with an unruly child. These things happen all the time in our public schools. And if the committee is going to consider cutting administration, these issues will get worse. I provided some statistics giving a very middle-of-the-road, this is not a partisan entity, this is the National Survey of Children's Health and Behavior and Data Beliefs. And what we've seen, in 2023, 5.3 million adolescents aged 12 to 17 had a current diagnosed mental health or behavioral condition, including anxiety, depression, and conduct disorder. Anxiety, 16% of kids. Depression, 8.4% of kids. Behavior and conduct problems, 6.3% of kids. If you go on to the next page, it shows the level of increase. Mental and behavioral health is increased from 2016 to 23 by 35%. 35%. The prevalence of diagnosed anxiety increased 61%. Are the children different? The children are different. And what does that mean? That means that they're more complex, they need more extensive programming, and they need teachers and administrators who know and understand what to do to help them continue to grow. Depression increased 45%. I don't share all this to be, to kind of paint a grim picture here. I show this that we are dealing with extensive needs in our schools. And did I mention that we have the lowest K-12 per pupil cost in the state? We are not overburdened with too many administrators. Next slide. Justification for the level of administration in the Goffstown schools. I'm going to start with school safety. I've been doing this a long time. When I started this, we were dealing with kids passing notes. Now I'm worried about someone coming in with a gun and shooting up my schools. The world has changed. It can be an external threat, it could be an internal threat, it could be a student. This is what we deal with every single day. The world has changed. School administrators are responsible for overseeing our emergency operations plan. At the bottom of this, I used the middle school example that you're all likely familiar with. We had a threat written on a bathroom wall. I want you to understand how much time an incident like that takes school administration. That incident took Mrs. Milligan and her team offline for almost a week. Meanwhile, the Dean of Students continued to receive, on average, 6 to 8 office referrals every day. The work continues. We have to give everyone due process. We have to investigate. We have to follow all of the laws with respect to investigations, all of our policies. And one example like that can make an incredible situation that administrators are offline, and guess what? They can't support teachers during that time. That's one example. The next slide, legal compliance, risk management, and special education. Insufficient support from management can cost schools money. Injuries, lawsuits, poor supervision. One special education case that's mishandled can cost this school district hundreds of thousands of dollars. This is what your administrators are doing. The people in the back of the room, this is their job. Next slide. Teaching and learning. Recruiting and retaining staff has never been more challenging in public education than it is right now. I can't imagine why, but young people aren't going into this. In the years to come, this will continue to be a challenge. This will be something that I hope to see a swing in the right direction at some point, but we're not seeing it right now. Administrators allow teachers to teach and focus on student success in their classrooms. If a student is unruly, they can call and the student is removed. The teacher can continue to teach. That's what administration does. I'd also like to point out the number of uncertified teachers that we've hired has never been higher. In 2015, as an example, I had 6 individuals across the Goffstown School District that were on a special alternative pathway to certification plan. That takes extensive work, plan development, submitting to the state, coursework, oversight. And today, I have 3 times as many. Now I have 18. All of that is more work for administration. And I got to tell you, for the foreseeable future, I don't anticipate that getting any better. I expect that to continue to get worse and worse. Next slide, succession planning. So this is something that I think the Budget Committee hasn't heard before, so I appreciate the opportunity to bring this, Joe. When we've talked about administration in the past, I have not been as explicit with the Budget Committee about our efforts around succession planning, and I'd like to be more specific about that this evening. With the exception of Mr. Demers, who I don't know if he stepped out to the concert already or not, I am expecting all of my school principals to retire in the next 3 school years. The next 3 years. Mrs. Pishka at Bartlett is going to work 2 more school years. Mrs. Stoyle at Glen Lake School, I'm hoping, is going to work 2 more school years. My entire leadership team is going to turn over. Part of the reason that I have supported increasing the assistant principal at both Glen Lake and Bartlett to full-time, and I want to be really clear about this, we are training the next principals of these schools. This takes years, and you need someone who knows what they're doing and can run the schools to a standard that we expect. This is part of our administrative structure. So for years, the schools wanted to increase the Bartlett and Glen Lake. It used to be split between the 2 schools. We used existing positions. We did not increase headcount. We used existing positions to make those positions full-time to support the succession planning that we're going to see. Everyone who is in senior leadership program, positions in our SAU and in our school district will be gone, including your superintendent. Some of you might be pleased about that. Some of you might not be. But I'm telling you, I'm going to work between 2 and 4 more school years. That's it. I'm probably younger than I look. Maybe I'm not. My wife would say I'm not. But all of us are getting close, and we're going to be retiring. And I want you to know I am working so hard to create a succession plan that we have leaders that are ready to move into these positions instead of just hiring and saying, great, we'll see what we get. We're training the next generation of leaders in our buildings, and that's purposely what we're doing. Even Mrs. Milligan, she's younger than me, but her plans take her to another part of the country. So I'm sharing with you that all of my principals are going to be gone. Mr. McBride, if he's in the back here, he'll be the first one. You can congratulate Frank next year. All of us will be gone. We have slightly increased the administration levels to prepare for and to make sure that we are set up so that we have leaders ready to assume the principal and other positions in our school district. And the last slide I have here is a list of, I heard from Mr. Talbot that there was interest in having a list of all dues and fees. So we provided you with all of the, from account 811, we provided you with those organizations. I know that that was an interest to at least some of you. And then the very last slide, and then I'm going to give Mr. Gross the final word if I can, because I think he was going to highlight a couple of things when I was finished. The last slide continues to show the cost per pupil. So I have to tell you, I understand that there are questions about administration and levels of administration, and I'm sympathetic to the gentleman who spoke, to Karen. I understand, I hear what you're saying, Henry, I really do. But your problem is not with the Goffstown School District. Your problem is with the state of New Hampshire and the state not meeting its obligation to fund an adequate education for all kids. And unfortunately, that means that 90% of the costs of our local schools are borne by the taxpayer. And that is and remains wrong. So I tell you, I don't believe that we are overstaffed in our administration positions. I really don't. I really don't. Given the needs, the complex needs, and the succession planning that we're looking to do, I think our numbers and our levels are right, and my team is here and ready to answer any questions. So I would defer to Mr. Gross, and I think you're going to talk about the last slide, and then you can have the final word.
Thank you, Superintendent. You know, for those of you who know me, I have been here for about 6.5 years, and I worked in the private sector as a manager. And I think the value that I bring to the school district is I'm constantly talking about the private sector and trying to get away sometimes from the education, edu-speak world, and many of the administrators know that about me. But one of the things that I know that Brian has been so good at, which I'm telling you flat out, I meet with other business administrators across the state, the succession planning that Brian insists upon is critical in the business world. And any organization, you're trying to make sure that the next group of leaders and teachers, et cetera, are going to meet the needs of a community or any organization. I often hear from constituents, the voters, people in the community, we need to operate our town and our schools like businesses do. Well, I worked in business for 30 years. I can tell you with 100% certainty that we are using those same tools and methodologies in our school district. So that's one thing. When we talk about some of these administrative positions, I want to make it crystal clear. We didn't add a net total of new people. We repurposed positions. So if we had someone leave us, we repurposed. And that's what managers and leaders do. They take their existing headcount, and when there is attrition, people leave, they decide what is best for the organization. And that's what we did in terms of our succession planning. So overall, when you take a look at what the administration has done and the leadership, we have shifted around personnel, but we did it with intention and knowing that we're going to be having a lot of our leaders leave us, unfortunately, over the next 3 years. So again, repurpose positions, and many of you have been on the budget committee. That's been the theme that we have shared. Our student population has been relatively flat. So unlike a lot of other districts across the state where the student populations have decreased, and yet there's been no changes in staffing, et cetera, this district, fortunately for us, has seen relatively stable enrollments. And lest I remind you that we have 4 developments that are going to be coming online over the next 12 to 18 months, okay? Bog Road, there's others that are being built at the corner of Dana's Park, 114, et cetera. So more than likely, we'll have more students. And then the last thing that I did want to share, again, my world was, more of the private sector, is when you think of an administrator, this is a supervisor. This is a management person. And I worked for a company, a top Fortune 50 company, and the span of control for leadership and management was 7 to 12. You saw on these slides that we have some folks who are supervising up to 30 people. All right? 30 people. So the notion of there is an overabundance of top heaviness is woefully inaccurate. And in any other organization, you would have probably double or triple the amount if you use that 7 to 12 ratio. And the one number that gets lost in everything, Brian, I think, is students and parents. All right? So you have a couple of thousand students, and let's just say that you have another 3,500 parents and guardians. All of those people could be calling every single administrator every single day on a whole variety of different issues. So with that, I want to thank the chair and thank the budget committee for hearing me out. I shared with Israel, I don't know where my tax bill, and so when I heard the public comment, I'm a taxpayer in Goffstown as well, and I'm telling you, and I'll give you a copy. This is my tax bills, okay? In the year 2000, when SWEPT, the statewide property tax, was instituted, 60% of my education tax bill was the local share, and 40% was the state share. Take a gander at what it is now, 24 years later, 90% is local, and only 10% is the state. So, at its peak, in the year 2001, my tax bill was $1,035 for SWEPT. This past tax bill, $621. It went down 38%. I'm sorry, 35%. Went down. Whereas My local school tax went up 88.81%. I'll give you, here it is, like, you can have it, like, I'm willing to share. So the message is, I think we are trying to be very mindful of the costs and repurpose positions, et cetera. We do have a fundamental funding problem here. And unfortunately, it's pitting good people against each other. It's, as Karen and others were mentioning, it's forcing good people perhaps out of our communities. It really is. But it's not something that I think is local, per se. We're managing the dollars with the lowest cost per pupil in the state. It's simply a lot of other issues here with funding. So with that, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Budget Committee.
Thank you, Scott and Brian. Are there any comments to this presentation? None. Are there questions? Oh, no, it's not public comment right now. At the end of the meeting, you can comment again. From the committee, so we're deliberating on the school budget still. There's administrators in the room. Is there anything that anybody would like to bring up regarding the school budget? I have a question for Brian and Scott. I'm looking at the job responsibilities you gave us, and I see 2 administrator positions for the elementary school. I see an assistant principal, special ed facilitator, and I see a principal for the elementary school. In these job descriptions, it basically says safety of students, and then the principal supervises safe and responsible transportation of all bus students to and from elementary school. I do not see a job description for a dean of students for the elementary school in this packet. So can you get us a job description for this position?
We discovered while we were compiling this that we don't have one. So that was a shortcoming on our part. So we did not make a new job description at the elementary level. And these, if you look at the date on these are pretty old. So this is a packet that needs some work from us.
Because as you saw from the presentation, the responsibility, the changing environment has not kept up with those job descriptions. It just simply hasn't.
Okay.
I provided them because I was asked to.
Mr. Chair, is it comparable to the middle school dean of
Yes.
students? And could you explain the difference between those two? Is that okay?
That's fine. I'm surprised there's no job description for a position we have in the district.
Yes, I would
For
agree.
years we've had this position.
We've had it for
2 years.
a couple of
Yeah,
years.
that's surprising to me.
Yep.
All right. Go ahead,
We
explain
do
that.
have over 600 employees, though, so we have a rather large organization. But yes, actually, I would welcome maybe our 2 deans to come up and they can talk a little bit about it, Mr. Lacasse, Mrs. Ryu. I'll let them talk about what they do. Mr. Lacasse is the Dean of Students at Mountain View Middle School, and he is new to that role this year. He was in the classroom last year, so he can talk a little bit about what his transition has been like, and he's happy to answer any questions. But Mark and Jill has been a longtime teacher with us, and she has been in this position for a short while. I would also share, maybe I didn't say this, at Maple Ave, Mrs. Johnson, our absolutely wonderful assistant principal, is retiring this year. So part of the role for Jill has been to be ready to assume some of the responsibilities when Mrs. Johnson retires, and that's been part of our succession plan. I think I neglected to mention Mrs. Johnson as part of that.
Okay, so let me just ask, do you plan on eliminating the Dean of Students position at Maple when the progression happens?
So what I would say about that is, and it wouldn't just be that position, it would be the positions at Glen Lake and at Bartlett as well. Short answer is, I think we need to see what happens after the transition, but these were positions that in the past, I felt comfortable with being half-time. It didn't work for the schools. And Mrs. Stoyle could come up and speak to that, Mrs. Pishka could come up and speak to that, but why don't we start with our 2 deans?
Go ahead,
So,
thank you.
Please.
Do you just want me to share what I do, or do you have any specific questions? How would you like me to start?
Why don't you talk a little bit about what you do, and talk about the role that you play at the school. Certainly, Mrs. Grassett shared information from a teacher perspective, so feel free to add anything to that, Mark.
Sure. Yeah. So when I taught in the classroom for 15 years, and this is my first year outside of the classroom. And I think the best thing that happened for me as a teacher was when my daughter was born 9 years ago. because for like the first 6 years of my career, I obviously cared a lot about my students and cared a lot about the kids and had great and fun lessons. But when my daughter was born, I started to see my students from the perspective of not just a teacher, but also a parent. And now that I have a 9-year-old daughter and a 7-year-old son, and so when I've taken on this role of the Dean of Students, I try to think of every interaction that I have with those students that are brought to my office for one reason or another as if they were my own kids. And I want them to get the attention and the care and the due process and the fairness and the justice that I would hope that my kids would get in whatever the situation is, as the perpetrator or as the victim. So that's the mindset that I try to take each day to what I do. One thing that we do is a lot of preventative maintenance within the school. So I chair what's called the PBIS, which is Positive Behavior Intervention and Supports, which is a positive behavior plan that has school-wide for all students, but then we also focus it down on specific monthly themes. And all of this is kind of like you go to the doctor for your yearly physical. These are those like preventative sorts of things to like check on how we're doing within the school and try to get ahead of certain behaviors. I also oversee all duties. So that's bus duty, drop off in the morning. That's about a half hour's worth of time where kids are getting dropped off before the school day starts. We have 5 lunches that we go through each day, so I'm in charge of overseeing those duties and making sure that those are safe, because when you put 150 to 200 pubescent middle school kids in the cafeteria, you can imagine the sorts of things that can happen there. And then also, it takes about 30 minutes for the buses to pick up all the kids in the afternoon, so I'm overseeing those duties as well. And then one of my major responsibilities is student management. So this year in September, I averaged 6.4 office referrals a day. October was 6.6. And this past month of November was 8.4 office referrals a day. So that's something that a teacher feels like they can't handle at the classroom level. And so now they're reaching out to me for assistance in some way with it. So what those often involve is some sort of investigation where, okay, I have to give every side a due process. There's usually the allegation against someone, so I need to make sure that I talk to both sides. Kids aren't always fully honest, so I utilize the camera systems within the school, which is very helpful. But then I also have to interview witnesses and then also interview teachers. And if I have a kid in my office and I'm talking to a kid about something, I usually try to call home to those parents, even if they're just a witness in the situation. Mr. Bulkey told me that I should keep a phone log to make sure that I'm tracking who it is that I call. I checked today and I've made close to 350 phone calls to parents just in the first 3 months of the school year this year. So whenever there's something that's pretty extreme, like a bullying situation, there's been 2 substantiated cases of bullying at our school this year, and that involves a lot of state paperwork that goes along with that as well, notifications to all the parents and families involved, also Title IX investigations. Assistant Superintendent Kohler is my liaison for that, so I work with her, also implementing behavior plans for students. I attend as many parent meetings as I possibly can, also IEP meetings or 504 meetings, especially when there's behavior involved with those students as well. And then on top of that, I try to be in the classroom as much as I can. Being a teacher for 15 years, anytime an administrator walked in my room, it meant so much. And so I just try to be that person as much as I can, even if I'm walking in for 2 seconds or 10 seconds or 30 seconds. And the days where I get so inundated with referrals and parent calls, I get kind of bummed because it keeps me from just going and walking the school and getting into the classrooms as much as I would like to. And that's also part of the preventative maintenance, right? When I see the kids, I catch wind of things before they happen and all of those sorts of things. So I guess I would say those are a lot of the main responsibilities that I have.
Mrs. Ryu, maybe you could add on some about bus supervision, dealing with bus issues,
Yep.
ensuring safety on buses as well.
So at the elementary school, it's pretty similar, except that the students are much younger. And I will say that I've been in this Goffstown School District, this is my 23rd year. I did start out as a teacher. I love it here, and my kids have gone to school here. And I, just like Mr. Lacasse, try to have every interaction with the students that I work with be one of a teaching experience. So the kids at the elementary level are much younger, but they are coming in with lots and lots of baggage. And I'm trying to guide them and help them learn so that they grow up to be successful young adults. I do coordinate a lot or collaborate a lot with the bus company. I'm kind of the liaison, so when there's issues, I get the bus write-ups. I talk with the bus drivers, if not daily, weekly for sure, to make sure that things are going well. I'm calling parents to address issues on the buses. I'm talking with students about their expected behaviors on the buses. So that is a big part of my job. I also am the coordinator for the 504 plans at Maple Ave. So I run all the 504 meetings, which are accommodation plans that are put in place so that students have equal access to the general curriculum. So meetings with parents, making sure that the teachers understand what they need to do and their responsibilities. And I also am one of the co-chairs of the MTSSB, which is Multi-Tiered Systems of Support, and it's the behavior aspect of it. So we can provide supports to students who we see may need extra support in the area of academics and in the area of behaviors. And we have different programs that our guidance counselor, myself, and some other staff members use. We provide students with lunch groups or tools and strategies. We check on them in the classrooms to make sure that they are being successful, that they're not having their emotions take over, which then disrupts the entire class. The teacher has to stop learning. So a lot of support of teachers as well. Do you want some of the behavior data?
Maybe ask if there are questions, Joe?
Yeah, there are questions. So, Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Could both of you describe to me, because unfortunately I wasn't able to shadow you guys, could you describe me a typical day, what it looks like?
I can start. So today I had a lot of things on my to-do list, and a typical day ends up never being the to-do list. So this morning started with a leadership committee meeting that I was part of with staff members where we were discussing some different things that have been going on in the building and getting feedback from staff. Then I had a meeting right away at the start of the day for a 504, so I met with a parent and a teacher. Then I got a phone call because a student was having some behavior issues, so I needed to go and address the classroom and make sure that the student was successful, pulled them out into the hall, talked with them a little bit, found out what was going on, got them back on track. When I got back to my room, there was a situation that I had dealt with yesterday afternoon of a student stealing and lying about it that I needed to follow up on. So we had the school resource officer. I gave him a call to see if he could come over and speak with this student. And then while we were waiting for him, I was able to, I'm trying to think, what else did I do today? I had some bus write-ups that had came through my email, so I went and spoke to those students about them. I followed up with their parents. The school resource officer came and the student was brought down to my office. We had a conversation. Then as the day went on, I was able to stop down and see the kids practice a little bit of their performance that they're doing here tonight. And then I was back up finishing up some paperwork, and that got interrupted because I got a phone call from another parent who had some concerns, and then I also got another email from a parent about something that had happened earlier in the week in their student's class. So I was doing some investigating with that, and then the day was done, and I was still following up and sending emails along to make sure that I was, responding to the parents in an accurate time. So I do like to try to get into the classrooms. The other day, I scheduled a block of time. One of the classroom teachers asked for people to read to their students. So I scheduled the time, and I spent about 20 minutes reading a book with the kids, and they thought it was great. And those are the moments I really look forward to and wish I could do more of, because it helps to build that positive rapport with the kids, so that they do come to you when they are having a problem. Because I will say at the elementary level, I'm finding more and more kids don't want to share things, and it's ending up causing behaviors or problems with other students. And if we can build that rapport with them where they feel that they have trusted adults, hopefully we can kind of stop those.
So the day's fairly similar. So like this morning, I started off at 7:30 with a PBIS meeting. So I'm a chair of that committee, which is the Positive Behavior Intervention and Supports. Then I went off and I was overseeing the 5th and 6th grade bus duty until all the buses were dropped off. And then from there, I have typically a couple-hour chunk of time where I can start to work through the investigations that I have. But just to give you like a little example of how long certain things can take, a couple of weeks ago, I had a parent email me that her kid was picked on the previous day on the bus, and she was asking for me to look into it and gave me some of the details, and her child has autism on top of the fact. And so I started the investigation that day, and I talked to the student, and then I talked to the alleged perpetrator, and probably had enough information to say, okay, like, this is the consequence that you have for doing it, because the person kind of told me the truth, but you can kind of tell truth, half truth. But I decided, you know what, I feel like I need to see the bus video, because I think there's more here to this. But in order to see bus video, I have to reach out to Superintendent Balke, who then gives me permission and contacts the bus company that I have permission to see that. So that was granted. The next day I went and I viewed the bus video, and it was worse than I could possibly imagine. So then I was able to get a copy of the video to then share with Superintendent Balke and my principal, Mrs. Milligan. And then it opened up into a larger investigation for this student. But again, I try to think about all these kids as if it was my own kid. So for that kid on the bus who was being picked on, it's, okay, like, I would want my administrator to go the extra mile to make sure every single box is checked and that they're being well cared for and have a safe environment within the school. So going back to my day today, so I had a small chunk of time to work through the number of office referrals I had, to talk to kids, to call their parents. And then I was down at the SAU at 11 o'clock today because we had a discipline hearing with Superintendent Balke with that student and their parents for the bus infraction. And then when I got back to school, it was around noon. And one of my main responsibilities is to be within the cafeterias during the lunches to oversee those duties. But that's also a time for me to get to talk to some kids. And then in the afternoon, I had a number of open investigations that I was trying to close up, but I was like, you know what, I need to be in the classroom. So I just started walking the classrooms, popping in and out. And I pop into a classroom and a kid says to me, Mr. Lakash, should I be a snitch? I was like, sure, yeah, let me know. And I was like, he goes, well, yesterday I was leaving school and I saw a vape fall out of a girl's pocket. I was like, oh, where were you? Tell me about this. He didn't know the student's name, but was able to give me the information, and we were able to conduct our search and, help with, figure out the situation and help with that student who had that and then give the necessary consequence for it. But if I hadn't gotten out into the classroom, that kid never would have come to me. So it's getting in the classroom, it's working through the office referrals, it's organizing our positive behavior system within the school. It's analyzing data. We have a program with PowerSchool called Swiss, which is able to help us analyze data and see what areas is taking place in, what are the behaviors, what are the grades, all those sorts of things.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you. The next question I'm going to ask, and this is coming from the perspective of the position, not as you as individuals and your performance, but if your position didn't exist, how would it impact school culture and student performance or achievement?
Yeah, so that was one thing that I wrote down. I need to make sure that I say, because I see my job as the dean of students as basically the servant of everyone. So I need to serve the teachers to make sure that they can teach. I need to serve the students so they have a safe environment. And so what I'm trying to do every single day is make it so that teachers can teach and kids can learn and that achievement grows, right? Kids go to school to learn. And so that's what I'm trying to make happen every single day. So if you were to take this position away, and being a classroom teacher, like for 15 years, I feel like I can speak to this pretty well too. Now more is going to fall on me, or it's going to fall on the shoulders of Mrs. Williams, the assistant principal, or Mrs. Milligan, the principal. And the reality is that I just described to you my days, and I honestly, like, most days I don't eat lunch. Like, I was used to at least 22 minutes of a scheduled lunch every day as a teacher. I never have time for lunch anymore. And so more of it's going to fall onto the other administrators that are left. But I'll just be honest, they're not going to be able to handle it. Not because of who they are as people, but just the other responsibilities they have. Or more of it's going to fall onto the teachers. And, like, I'm working my butt off to help out with this challenging 8th grade group, but you could even hear the frustration in Mrs. Grassett's voice, right? With like the behaviors, the constant behaviors with the kids not learning. And we're trying a number of different methods to be able to help solve these issues. But so I guess the short answer is I'm not sure how all of the behaviors and student management would happen if there wasn't this position there.
And I can share at the elementary level, my position has been there only 2 years. And prior to that, the teachers were feeling extremely frustrated because students were having behaviors or disrupting the learning in the classroom. And the 2 administrators were unable to get to the situations as quickly. And sometimes many of them went unspoken to, students went unspoken to, and now the students, it's more immediate. I try to get to them that day or the next day, but the other 2 administrators, it was falling a lot on their shoulders to manage all that, and then the guidance counselor as well was trying to help out and support, and she was not able to provide the supports that she needed to provide as accurately as she is now.
Laura,
Thank you.
Laura, you have a question?
It's not a question, it's more of a statement, and I'm actually going to make myself a little bit vulnerable here, because I don't know if I'm the only one feeling a visceral reaction to this line of questioning. I don't know when it became the Budget Committee's prerogative to have 2 professionals sit in front of us and defend their position. I am appalled by this whole thing. I thank all our administrators and all our teachers, all our people that are here tonight. You have families, you have other commitments, and it is, my heart is beating. I am at a loss for words that this is what we are spending our time with right now. I hope I'm not the only one feeling this way, but I commend you both for even being able to speak as eloquently as you did, because I am feeling rage throughout my body. And I just want to lay this out there. I don't know how that makes me look. I don't care. But I am appalled, and I think this should end. Thank you.
Okay. Olivia?
I think a lot of times in this, we've heard that when we were in school, these positions didn't exist, and frankly, we didn't grow up right now. I want to thank you all for coming. I did go to all of these schools. I did have some of these teachers, and you guys have dedicated your worlds to our children, whether we ask you to or not. And you show up every single day and you come and spend your nights doing this. And I'm sorry that this is how you're spending your Thursday night.
Okay. Any other questions for the Dean of Students? Elizabeth?
Not for the Dean of Students.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so
Appreciate
much.
Go ahead, Elizabeth.
I just want to try and, I share Laura's sentiments on this, and I just want to try and keep this moving along in a
Yep.
productive manner. So these organizational charts are great. I think they really help me kind of keep this all straight in my head. And I think we should start looking at these charts. I mean, I'm sorry, I should not speak for you at all. I happen to be sitting next to you at one of these meetings, and I remember you and I saying, maybe we were just getting confused. We're like, okay, it seems like they keep talking about these titles, and there's more than one, and we don't know who is where, and there's overlap. And so this helped me a lot. And I think we should start looking at these and working our way through them and seeing if we still have questions, because at the end of the day, we have to vote on this budget. And if people have questions about administration, we need to resolve them. Or decide that we're not gonna be able to resolve them and move on. So if it were up to me, I think we should look, Glen Lake School, start there.
Well, and just to add on to that, my concern is there's a position that doesn't have a job description. So how is this position evaluated each and every year? Like, how do we evaluate an individual that doesn't even have a job description?
Well, we could certainly ask Mrs. Pishka to come up and speak to this.
That would be great.
She was the principal at Maple Ave last year. Joe, I already apologized that we don't have a job description.
I understand,
Joe,
but-
I will get a job description done for that, I promise you. And we didn't recognize that we didn't have it until we were compiling this for the Budget Committee this evening. Mrs. Pishka, would you like to come up and speak to that?
I'm going to let Ms. Fisher come, and then I'll recognize you.
So as Jill described, Mrs. Johnson and I, at the time, our population was 530 students. We both had, as you've seen our list of job description, a full plate, and to continue to have an increase of behavior concerns, and as Jill mentioned, not being able to be timely in some of our responses because we were being pulled in all directions. We had made the proposal to the superintendent. Our proposal was based off of what we knew about a dean of students at Mountain View Middle School, which would have been our closest comparison. So we saw that as this person would oversee our multi-tiered systems of support for behavior, because just seeing the dean of students does not support a student enough. There needs to be a plan in place. So putting those plans in place take time and a lot of people. So we based our rationale and our thoughts on how we would utilize this person from the Mountain View Middle School's Dean of Students.
Okay. Thank you. Laura?
This is outside the scope of the budget committee. Let the school board, as Brian Balke said, they will handle it. Let the school board deal with their policies, with their job descriptions. Stop. I don't know what the goal is here. We're looking at a budget. Stop.
Okay. Brian?
Thank you, Chair. If you guys allow me, I want to go through an exercise, because I think it will tie into our further discussion, deliberation, where, and I'll give you some data points. Unfortunately, I don't have this handout to share with everyone, but I want to give you the data points, I'll talk to it, and then we can have a discussion. But basically, and all this data is on the DOE, where I looked at student achievement for ELA, English Language and Arts. I looked at math and science from 2008 to present. I looked at total enrollment, same duration. Also looked at administration salary, average teacher salary. That's the data I have, except for 2020. There's no data for COVID years, apparently. So that year is omitted. And I'm going to make an assumption here. I don't have the data yet, but I was asking for the payroll spend, total dollars across all individual positions between the district and schools, and then total number of individual positions for the district and school. My assumption is, when you look at charts, and let me break it apart. So you look at achievement from 2018 to present, unfortunately, we have undesirable outcomes. It goes down. Like back in 2018, ELA was 66%, math 56%, science was 49%. Presently, ELA is at 57%, math is at 43%, and science is at 41%. To me, if I look at a letter grade, that's all failing. So I'm saying we're missing the mark here. Undesirable outcomes, we're failing our kids. It's a stark observation. But respectfully, the thing I really wrestle with is that I'm tired of hearing about not getting state funding, because throwing more money at this, if we look at the trajectory or trending, it's only going to get worse if we add more money. So something is fundamentally wrong here. So we have to look at things differently and have a different perspective and different paradigm, because I'm just looking at the data and I'm detaching positions and performances. I'm looking at the raw data. It's not trending in the right direction for our taxpayers and also our kids' outcomes. So I want to bring that up because that's going to aid our conversation, because I don't know where to go from here, because throwing more money at it is simply not solving the problem, which is worsening achievement scores.
Thank you, Samantha, and then Peter.
So I know in last year's budget presentation, and I know that the school didn't do it this year, which I thought was kind of a bummer, because I also like to look at like where the proficiency is in test scores, right? And I know last year they had it in there. And there was a dip in 2021 because it was post-COVID year, and then it was trending upward in 2022, and then it trended upward in 2023, and I don't know what it is for 2024. It looks like Superintendent Balke's typing away to pull that up. I love that.
I mean, I could share this with you, excuse me.
Right, but I know that I don't think we can compare 2018 to now, because we've had a global pandemic. I don't think anyone can dispute that hurt a lot of kids. And that affects them on standardized testing. And I also know that you can't measure everyone in standardized test scores. And so I guess I'm saying I think that you're wrong in that throwing money at this doesn't solve this problem, because it is improving. And we've had to change how things are. And I guess what would be a different solution other than employing other teachers and administrators, which is essentially throwing money at it? Like, what is the other solution?
I'm gonna let Peter go.
Oh, she asked my question. I was just gonna ask she said something about a failed paradigm or something. I was just hoping you could explain that.
Well, as a response to Sam, and I appreciate that, but the data clearly shows, regardless of his COVID, which was back in 2020, and we're now in 2024, it's still going down in the wrong direction. And this data is on the DOE. So it's not getting better, there's no improvements. And to me, that's very stark and very troubling. And if I was a parent, I would be appalled.
Are your statistics specific to the New Hampshire, or are they nationwide?
No, this is Goffstown.
Okay, just Goffstown.
Yeah, DOE Goffstown. Yeah, so, I mean, again, you can go there yourself, but this data is not favorable in my eyes. And in my purview is, are we getting all the benefit for all of our tax dollars? And at the bigger picture level, I'm seeing undesirable outcomes. So to me, if I look at personnel, this is where I wrestle with. It's like, and I appreciate the Dean of Students coming up and doing their comments, is I'm still struggling with their particular role, because again, when I went to school, I think I had a principal and a guidance counselor, and that's it. Now these other positions, and I respectfully know school's different now. There's more challenges, but again, I want teachers to teach, because school is all about academics, and if we're not seeing desirable outcomes, then we're failing somewhere. Fundamentally, it's broken. So how do we fix it? I don't have the answers. This is more of a conversation, data point, but I want to bring it up because I'm really wrestling with this, and I personally think throwing more money at it through more local higher property taxes or more money coming from the state, I don't see how it's going to affect the outcome based upon our trending. So,
Brian, did you?
Yeah, I was going to share with, I'm not entirely sure what Mr. Mazur is looking at or what his statistics are, but I'd like to point out, we have a document on our website. If you go to our website, it's under the curriculum tab that's called Goffstown Achievement. Not sure if you've seen this, Brian. This provides an overview of all of our schools and all of our student achievement for multiple years. So again, I'm not entirely sure what Brian's looking at, but let me tell you that New Hampshire continues to outperform the rest of the country. We're in the top 5 in SATs, have been every year. So the achievement at the end for high school students is very strong. In this document, we show the achievement for the English language arts proficiency, and at third grade, we are above the state. Fourth grade, we are slightly below the state. Fifth grade above the state, sixth grade above the state, seventh grade above the state, eighth grade above the state. Every single one of those except for one grade. I'm looking at math. Third grade, above the state average. Fourth grade, above the state average. Fifth grade, above the state average. Sixth grade, above the state average by 13%. Seventh grade, flat, 39% achievement, proficient or above, the state is at 39%. And eighth grade, we're above the state. So there's one grade level that we're not in seventh grade. Same story for science. Goffstown continues to outperform the state in grades 5 and 11. Grade 8, we are slightly below. We've identified that we have some needs in science, and we actually included some money in our curriculum to improve some of the science, but same story here. So Brian, I might encourage you to go take a look at that document. I do think we can always continue to grow, but we are outperforming the state in almost every single metric in every grade level. So, you know, are we doing a good job with taxpayer money? We are. And if the premise is somehow we're mismanaging, with less money, do we think achievement's going to improve? If we have less money and less resources, do we think student behavior is going to improve? Do we think teacher satisfaction is going to improve? Do we think we're going to have the ability to hire and retain more staff? Does anyone think that's going to happen with less money? And did I mention we are the lowest K-12 in the entire state?
Okay, thank you, Allison.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to echo that too. I mean, Brian, you're referencing throwing money at it, but we're literally on a default budget. We have the lowest per pupil cost. Why don't we try throwing money at it and see what all these amazing teachers can do with the things that they would love to have to be able to do. We've never thrown money at it. You're bottom of the barrel. They are doing such an amazing job with the little bit that they're getting per kid.
Olivia, then Elizabeth, and Brian.
I appreciate that you did some research and brought it with the population numbers. I think anybody with any experience with children, one of the things they know is that kids don't follow the numbers and they don't follow the charts, and sometimes they just have more stuff. They have more needs, they have more baggage, and sometimes that's because of COVID, and sometimes that's just because it's a whole lot of them in a really small space with people trying to do the best they can in those spaces. And so while I appreciate the numbers, it's not, staff to child ratio is not the same as like amount of people that are safe in an elevator. It's just, it's not the same. There's too many variables in kids and in class sizes and grade sizes that constantly change for a population graph to be effective.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, I mean, I was not an educator, and I came to education late in my career, and I had to learn all this stuff from the get-go. And I just got to say, it is so much more complicated than numbers on a chart. I mean, I think Brian has already sort of refuted some of that research, but there is so much going on in education, and these numbers just take everything out of context. I mean, there's no context to this. So even if we accepted that argument and those numbers as declining achievement, you don't have any information about the cause. I mean, for all you, and to go blundering around and say, well, we're just going to unfund it, I mean, that seems incredibly irresponsible to me. I mean, there's a lot going on with education right now. There's a lot going on with the way they're testing kids. There's a huge revolution going on in the way they teach kids to read. And, you know, there's a lot of information, a lot of science right now that says we've been doing it wrong for like the last 20 or 30 years. And now we're implementing these new methods that are substantially better and are backed by real research. I mean, I think there are enormous problems to just looking at a few numbers on a graph and then making these huge assumptions. For all you know, underfunding it, funding it less, is going to make the problem exponentially worse. So there are issues with education. I think Brian would be the first to agree with this. He and I have discussed this before, but we ought to be smart about it and not just, and spend our time wisely to identify problems correctly before we try and implement solutions that may make everything worse.
Right. Thank you, Chair. I guess a first comment to Superintendent. That data from the DOE, I guess we should get together because I don't know what you report to DOE, but that's directly from the DOE in regards to achievements, so for the town of Goffstown. But to kind of reframe it again into a corporate job, if we have these achievements and I was performing at that level, I would first go into probation, and then if I didn't correct my course and do better achievement, I would be fired.
You can't fire kids, though.
It's not a
Right?
direct analogy, but
Okay.
I'm
All right.
just saying,
Yeah.
and I appreciate
Yeah.
Elizabeth, what she said too about, there's a lot of things else going on. I understand that, but to me, it's like there's something fundamentally broken with how we're using everyone's tax dollars and we're getting undesirable outcomes.
Even though we're above the state average. in
That doesn't mean
almo-
nothing to me.
Almost every
Doesn't mean-
grade level, every
Respectfully,
subject
it doesn't
area.
mean anything to me. Respectfully,
All
it
right.
doesn't.
If I may.
This is
Let's-
our community.
Let's try
and we're
not to
failing our
interrupt
kids
each other.
at our community, unfortunately.
Thank you, Brian. Scott?
Yeah, so the DOE has a wonderful resource, and I know I've tried to spread this all around. It's called iExplore. And you have it on your screen, and I picked the first one. It was Goffstown High School, so for the high school folks here. And what you'll see, and this is the most recent, is that ELA proficiency is at 71%, and according to the DOE, it's in the top 25% of the state. Math proficiency is at 36%, and it's in the middle 50% for the state. And science proficiency is at 52%, again, in the top 25% of the state. I totally understand, or I shouldn't say, there are people who may not understand what proficiency means and what the state standard is, et cetera, and when they see a number that, how can we be in the top 25% with a 52% proficiency in science? I get that. That's something that we'll have to do a better job as a community, as an educators, to explain how the state does that. But when you look at these metrics, and again, I only pulled up one school, you can look at all this stuff. It's so awesome that you can look at average class sizes. Kim would probably know better than anybody. There might be research out there regarding class sizes and academic performance, et cetera. We have one of the higher average class sizes in the state if you look at the data. But you'll be able to see by just clicking around, and this is one of them, I don't know, like, I like data, so this is one way for people to look at achievement data, cost data, et cetera, and you can form your own opinions. You don't have to rely upon me or anybody else because the numbers are what the numbers are. Reality of it is that our student test scores have been a little bit like an EKG over the last 5 or 6 years with COVID, et cetera. And I think what impacts these test scores is a lot of the things that our deans of students and others talked about, behaviors, et cetera. The other thing that resonated with me is that we have people in our community who are concerned about school safety. They are concerned about discipline and all those other things. We're not hiding from that as a school district. The data shows it. The superintendent put it in his PowerPoint. We understand it. We do. But think about this. Think about the time that we're spending on a budget that is $270,000 more than the default, with the lowest cost per pupil. Are we spending our time tonight talking about how we're going to improve student achievement? No, because we are talking about this stuff, to your point. So the data is there, and I think what you're going to see, which we talk about every single year, is that Goffstown has one of the lowest cost per pupil in the state, and its educational outcomes are better than the state average. That has not changed. So from an ROI perspective, because that's how my world thinks, Brian, and others, we're getting pretty good bang for our buck because we're paying the least of any, so if we were in the bottom and we're paying one thing, but we are seeing better than average results with the lowest cost per pupil, the lowest in the state.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Kelly?
I guess my question for you, Brian, we're talking about, the philosophical, whether your data matches, you have a strong belief, and that's okay, but as an appropriations committee, what is your recommendation? Are you making one, or?
I'm not sure yet. We're having this conversation. Like, can I speak, Chair? So if the data shows me that there's undesirable outcomes for students, my mind clearly goes, if something's broken, is it the lack of teachers? The actual educators that are directly teaching our kids? Is there a lack of those? I don't know. I also am wrestling with all the other functions that I know there are more support staff or administration to support the teachers, but something is broken where we're not getting the outcomes that is desirable. Now, I will say, as a follow-up, all of this is coming from a myopic focus because my constituents say my taxes are going up. How can we do less with more, meaning less spent? It's simple as that. So it's all about efficiency, how we can shave everything off. And if we're not getting good outcomes for every dollar spent, I'm wrestling with that. And so is my constituents. So,
Frank?
Yeah, I agree with that last part Brian said. The citizens elected us to put together a budget and do it efficiently and fund departments. And I think that's what everybody's trying to do here today. We don't decide positions. That's up to the school board or the towns. But we do decide the line items. And where that comes in a cross-section is, and to Brian's point, the dean position is there primarily to assist with discipline. Is that right, Superintendent?
Correct.
And we're seeing the disciplinary issues rising radically at the same time. I think, I'm paraphrasing for Brian, but it seems like the position is there to help with the discipline, yet in a half a dozen slides, we see disciplinary issues rising significantly. So I see the connect. But our position is to fund these departments, and if our constituents are saying our taxes go up, we don't like it, we want you to be thorough, we want our departments funded, and we want our kids educated, we don't want to do it responsibly, that's why we're turning over every stone. We're not asking to change positions, we're asking as they relate to a line item. So that's it.
Olivia and Sam.
I had a question for Brian Balke. Correct me if I'm wrong, if I misheard, but the kids are coming to school already exhibiting issues, correct? Where life doesn't end as they walk into the school building, so that was the role for deans of students, was to continue helping them to manage to be able to access education?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Sam.
So I love like a good like hypothetical. I've kind of been like playing around with this in my mind, like if, and to Frank's point, like we're in charge of line items, right? So if we chose to eliminate this from the teacher's budget, like the teacher salary line, there's nothing saying that this school couldn't move it from the technology line to refund the salary line, right? Just so everyone knows. But if this position did not exist and the behavior issues were still on the rise, which I would attribute behavior issues being on the rise to that position existing and more of them being caught, right? Because it doesn't mean that they weren't happening, it just meant that they weren't being reported, right? What happens with those kids, right? So if it's still happening and it would go to the principal, right? And then those kids get taken out of school, parents have to stay home with their kids. Well, I'm just wondering like what happens in that instance of like a disciplinary review? Because the dean of students isn't as high as like a disciplinary review as a principal, correct? I don't really know if this is a question that I'm asking, of more of like a mind.
So in the hierarchy, yes, the principal is above the dean.
Yeah.
Correct.
So if a child is being disciplined by the dean of students, that discipline may not necessarily result in detention or suspension.
It may not. It may
Okay.
not, it may result in an opportunity to teach kids, to re-educate, to get kids back on track, for administrators to continue to build relationships with students. Everything doesn't always result in a disciplinary outcome.
Okay. Would you say that when seeing a principal, it's more likely to result in a detention or suspension?
I'm sorry, I'm not.
I guess my thought is that, like, in allowing a dean of students to discipline a student, that doesn't affect, like, a parent's home life more. Like, that is the result of that, right? Because if your child has to stay home because they're suspended, that parent isn't able to go to work or do the things that they would like to do because they have to care for their child at home. Whereas if they have a dean of students that's able to talk with them and kind of meet them on their level, it doesn't, I don't know, maybe I'm not making complete sense, like in my, like I have to think of this thought a little bit more, but you can
Laura,
move
go
on.
ahead.
Thank you. I know what you're trying to say, Samantha.
Okay.
I don't think I think I know what you're trying to say. So the dean of students, and as we've heard again and again, they take care of all that to free up the teachers so the teacher's entire classroom doesn't have to be disrupted so they can continue to educate.
Okay, yeah.
And so the other admin with their other priorities can continue to focus on school safety and those other things. So it's not so much a home life, like any disciplinary action or not coming from whomever could end up in suspension, detention, or none of that. It's more the dean of students takes care of it, so we can give what the community wants is the teachers to focus on the educating, so they don't have to take up their time, their classroom's time, disrupt all the students. Those students can be pulled and dealt with in whatever manner for whatever reason. The teaching continues and the administrative safety and other parts continue.
Thank you.
Because that piece is pulled out.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Peter?
Brian, you had mentioned, I think you had said 3-year succession planning. Was that or I don't know if it was you or Scott. When we're talking about that idea of like we've been doing succession planning, I'm trying to get an idea of like what, as an investment, succession is costing us. Like, what's the cost of like planning for succession, right? God, I can't say that word. It's such a hard word to say. So when was that something that we started to implement? What year? Was it like starting this year or starting last year?
No, we started that about 12 years ago.
Yeah, long time.
So it's, okay, I
We-
thought I
we
heard the
have-
number 3.
This is a deep ideological commitment to the premise of continuing to grow talent,
Yeah.
to promote from within. In fact, the administrators that are my new administrators in the room were all teachers in the Goffstown School District. They were all here. We've promoted from within. We have cultivated our own next generation of leadership. So we have been doing this succession planning, Peter, for my entire duration as superintendent. We've been planning for retirements for all positions across all of our schools, including the SAU.
So it's not, I guess I misheard something. I thought I heard something about there being a 3-year plan when you were speaking.
What I said
earlier.
was, in the next 3 years, all of my principals, with the exception probably of Mr. Demers, will be gone.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to plan for that. I'm trying to provide stability and predictability, that we have people who are ready to assume those leadership roles. That's an extensive component of what we're trying to do from a leadership perspective.
And if I could just add on, because I think you asked a really good question when you said, what is the cost of succession planning itself?
Yeah.
Reframe it. What's the cost of not doing succession planning and having to bring in untrained folks who do not understand how to do their jobs and/or how Goffstown students, or Goffstown and its unique identity, et cetera. So what we try to do, the cost of succession planning is more incremental, based upon my 30 years of management. If you do it incrementally, failure of succession planning is usually more catastrophic, meaning that in the private sector, you lose customers, you lose revenue, et cetera. The consequences here are worse because you could lose teachers. If you don't have confidence in your leadership of a building, teachers will not come here from a retention and to attract staff. So please keep in mind that. And then the other thing that keeps on getting lost in all of this is that, again, I came from the business world. I'm about free markets, et cetera. Houses are selling like that here, okay? They just are. And do you think that they're selling here because people just want to live, in Goffstown? Or is it based upon schools? Is it based upon the community? Everything that the community offers, the safety, parks, and all those other things. Because last I checked, houses are turning over crazy and you can't get into this town. So I leave it at that.
Do you
It's a
mind if I
desirable
follow up
place.
on that? Good. All right. So just to be clear, again, I heard 3 years, so that's why I wanted to ask about that. But moreover, bringing up, everything we talk about, every line on here has a cost.
Right, it's fair game too,
But-
every one.
But I was kind of trying to figure out, well, what is he saying when he's like, well, here's the other side of that. Well, that's why you spend the money on it, right? That's why we were investing the money in it. So I understand that. I'm saying, okay, if I could somehow say, okay, how much am I investing every year in succession planning? I kind of want to know that. It doesn't mean I don't think that there's value there. I'm saying I kind of want to have an idea of how much of what I'm doing every year is about planning for the future, which is important, right? I think everyone here on Budget Committee can say, we want to see planning for the future, not just next year. So I commend that. Again, I thought I had heard it's a specific time. So I was thinking, oh, is this a ramping up per se that I should start kind of thinking about? That's all.
Okay. Elizabeth?
So when we started some of this, and I made some of these requests for information, it was because I had concerns about duplication in administrators at the building level particularly. And the material you provided shows to me, it allayed my concerns. Okay, I can see through the job descriptions and the organizational chart, you have clearly defined roles at each of these schools, and they are not particularly overlapping. They probably, in the grand scheme of things, I'm sure that these employees work to provide, support where they can. But these are clearly defined roles. You've got people dealing with, straight up administration. You've got people dealing with behavior. You've got people dealing with curriculum, and you've got people dealing with special ed. And these are all clearly defined in their job descriptions and in the organization. So you have addressed my concerns that there is duplication at the administrative level at the buildings. I do not think there is, so thank you for providing that information. So that's why I started this bigger issue about sort of sitting in judgment of education systems. We're not gonna settle that tonight. I think that's a huge, we're just not. It's just gonna have to be agree to disagree, because we're not gonna get anywhere with this discussion.
Yeah, so to center it back, Budget Committee's purview, we do not control positions, we just control funding. It's a bottom line budget, so whatever happens, at the end of the day, there's 2 school board members in here, they can choose to accept it or not, or fund something else, or move money around. We just control the exact appropriation amount. So we're kind of trying to wrap up school side deliberations, knowing that we're going to look at the total budget once we have the town side as well. But is there anything that anybody else would like to talk to on the school side? While the principals are here, while the superintendent's here, this is a good time to do that. Brian.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. For Superintendent and Scott, in presentation, all these different associations, do all these have a lobbying arm or advocacy arm, do you know of?
I don't know. School Boards Association, I believe, does.
Yes.
I can't speak to the other one, Brian. But what I would add for the School Boards Association, all of our policies come from the School Boards Association, and they have 2 attorneys on staff, so we get free legal support through our membership in that as well. But that's the only one that I'm aware of, Brian. I think, actually, I think we saw emails that you had reached out to the state, and they had provided you.
Yeah, so I cross-referenced Mark Menji and.
Yeah.
Okay. Mark is someone who works at the state, and he provided, so I guess I got a copy of it too, but there's like hundreds upon hundreds of like paid lobbyists and organizations. The New Hampshire School Board Association is the only one on that list that I looked at that has a degree of lobbying.
Okay.
Yeah. Just so you know.
Peter?
Sorry, Scott, this wasn't something I liked to do the other night, but I have to do it again tonight. Israel's conversation as well. Are there any other stipend elected officials that are in the budget for the school? Like, is the,
Your
did we?
treasurer is stipended, and your moderator is stipended.
Would you be able to find those lines for us?
23, yeah, I can find that for you.
Thank you.
Right. Or you can, I mean, it's in the 2317, that 2300s, if you look in the budget, it's in there. I believe that
In the
tr-
district,
yeah,
000.
000.
So it'll be in the beginning.
Is the treasurer
Elected, and moderator is elected as well. No, it is elected.
It is on the ballot?
I put in a bill to make it.
Although I do have a bill in to
yeah.
make it appointed, at the request of the SAU. Right now elected.
So if you're looking at the election services, it's line 270 on page 11, I believe is one of them, for $900. Election services, school board stipends. So that, it doesn't look like, it does have FICA and other things. And then the treasurer is above it, but it's on the prior page.
Oh, you also have the clerk. There's three. So you have the clerk, I apologize, it's the school board clerk, because you have a town clerk as well. You have the moderator, and you have the treasurer. Those are all in there.
If you're looking at the treasurer, I know it was in there, because I saw it earlier.
Treasurer, district treasurer
Yeah,
salary.
line 253 on page 10.
Yeah.
May I ask, is this something that you have cut across all, like, every single stipend
That's-
and for all?
The only elected
Right.
official stipend that we have not cut is the town clerk, who is a full-time in-office position. But do you want to make a motion?
I'm not going to take it from Israel this time.
Oh, Israel. Okay, and then
Go for it, Israel.
Allison.
Can I ask a question about the stipend, or the stipends we're talking about before he makes his motion?
Sure, go ahead.
So Scott, how come on line 253, unless I'm misunderstanding this, that one doesn't call it a stipend, it calls it a salary? But the other ones,
In the title, Allison, is that what, let me just look at it first
Yeah,
before
sure.
I comment. The title was part of a chart of accounts when they were set up, and sometimes the way that whoever set it up, it really, it's.
but it is the same thing. is
They're
what
the
you're
same
saying.
thing.
Even though they call it a salary there. and
Exactly,
the-
yeah.
the,
God bless
thank
you.
Where is the clerk listed? I don't see that line.
If you want to make a motion on 231, which I believe is the school board stipends clerk, that actually had an increase of $500. This is not an elected position. This is, I believe, Ms. Moran in the meeting minutes that
Yes,
she
that's
takes for
different.
all of our minutes.
Right, there's two different, one of them is the meeting minutes, you're absolutely correct, and the other one is, Joanne Duffy is our school board clerk, and I think it's $150 or $200, something like that a year. And her responsibility is to take the minutes of the deliberative session. And she also, and she also certifies.
She's elected, but
She's elected, but her job is to do the minutes. She has to certify those minutes. She also has to certify the election, meaning that afterwards, when you have all of those results, she signs off on the ballot, like who won a particular race, how many votes were cast. It's her legal job to do that, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to recognize Israel for a motion.
I'm going to start with a motion to make line 270, reduce line 270 to 0, along with associated Medicare and FICA costs.
Okay, is there a motion by Israel? Is there a second? Second by Brian. So the motion is to reference line 270, function 10-000-2314-00124, school board stipends from $900 to 0. Is there any discussion on this by members? Jared?
Just as a note, I recognize that this is being consistent with the rest of the board, and normally I'd be voting with the rest of the board on this, but of course, being the representative of the school board committee and this budget, I'll be voting no for that reason.
Okay, thank you. Laura?
Can you just remind me again which one this line represents?
Scott?
You gotta bear with me a
Is that
second.
the moderator?
No, the moderator does not get paid $900. Know that for a fact. Just bear with me a second.
Is the moderator in with the regular school board stipends?
I thought that the school board moderator was in with the town. I thought that's what we-
No,
It's different. Because that's the deliberative session that they moderate as well as working the polls that they have. I thought it was $400.
I have to do, I didn't know this was coming, so you gotta hold on a second.
Okay.
So can I just say this, is that if you have reduced the stipends of all elected officials, then if that was a motion, I could execute that. I wouldn't be able to give you the dollar amount, tonight, but if you were.
Well, we don't want to do all elected officials because Joanne Duffy is the minute taker. That we want to do like
But you
line
can,
by
but
line.
you can, if your motion was to eliminate the
You know what I'm gonna
stipend
do,
for
Scott?
treasurer
I'm
alone.
gonna recess. I'm gonna
Right.
recess for 5 minutes and give you the opportunity to do this, to
Okay.
find the exact lines, okay?
Okay.
All right, so we're breaking until 8:06.
Right.
That was like around the time I was looking.
Okay, GTV's back, okay. So there's a motion and a second on the floor for reference line 270 regarding school board stipends. Scott Gross indicated that there's two salaries in that line. One is for the minute taker and one is for the moderator. Israel Carey, would you like to amend your motion to just do the moderator stipend?
Yes,
And not
I'll-
the minute taker stipend?
I'll amend my motion to just do the moderator stipend and associated Medicare and FICA.
Okay, and second by Brian?
Yes.
Okay, any more discussion on this line?
Did Scott figure out what that dollar amount was, or is he?
He's gonna do the dollar amount
Okay,
later.
cool.
But we're just directing him to
Okay.
strike that.
I believe
amount.
it's somewhere between $150 and $200 for the moderator.
All right, so all those in favor of Israel Carey's motion, please raise your hand. Those opposed? Abstentions? So Jared Talbot is opposed, Kelly Boyer abstains, so it passes 13-1-1.
I was opposed also.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Lydia.
12-2-1.
Olivia, you were against, correct?
Sorry, I didn't.
It's okay.
Okay.
Probably very sorry now.
Israel, do you have another motion?
Yes. I believe it's line 253.
Okay, what's the motion?
And the motion is to reduce that line to 0 with associated FICA and Medicare.
Okay, so motion by Israel Carey. Is there a second?
I will second it.
Second by Sam. The motion is to reduce reference line 253-10-000-2313-00125, school district treasurer salary from 1,500 to 0. Is there any discussion on this motion? Samantha?
Are there any minute takers included in that line, or is that
No.
1%?
No.
No, it's just 1%. Okay.
Jared?
Just a point of clarity, are we also including FICA?
Yes, that
Yes.
was in his motion.
Same thing, I'll be voting no, but we all know why.
All right. See no more discussion. All those in favor, raise your hand now. Those opposed? Olivia Welcher et al., Jared Talbot opposed. Kelly Boyer abstains. So motion passes 12 to 2-1. Anything else on the school budget? Brian?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for Scott as well. So I think I have the right reference line, which is 250.
Okay, hold on.
School board dues and fees.
Yes.
So I'm assuming the New Hampshire School Boards Association comes out of that,
Line 2, hold on.
250.
Page number, please, Brian?
10.
Yeah, that is the one.
Okay.
Yes.
Do we have a dollar amount and what the New Hampshire School Board Association is?
That is it.
Oh, that's the total
That-
amount?
Yeah, I believe that is. Can I just, give me a second just to double check the notes? But just my paying of bills, and I'm pretty sure that is the one. Again, just let me just double check that one.
Mr. Chair, and while Scott's looking, I did do some due diligence, and maybe, Mr. Chair, you can elaborate on this, but there is an LSR, there's going to be a potential bill behind this that the legislature is going to vote on eventually when it hits the floor, that someone's proposing that the state will prohibit public funds for lobbying and advocacy work. So that is coming.
Thank you. Scott?
Yeah, so that is the line. I will say whether or not it impacts the motion or not, but typically, they break down the invoice based upon, we buy what's called a policy subscription, and that is part of the invoice. So that has nothing to do, with lobbying. So I don't know if that impacts the motion or not. I would have to do research and pull the most recent invoice to see what that breakdown is. Or if your motion wanted it to be for exclusive of policy, I would figure out that number, just like I'm gonna figure out the other ones.
Okay.
I'm sorry, are you saying that there's like 2 levels of membership?
They break down their bill based upon a policy subscription, because you can buy that or not buy that, okay? We buy it, and most school districts do, but they do break, you have the ability to get the policy subscription or not. we tend to do that, and almost but they do break down their invoice that way. It's an à la carte thing.
Jared?
Can you only get the policy subscription if you are a member of
That
the
I don't know.
community?
That's my understanding that it is, but,
All right.
yeah.
I think that clears it up.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sorry, no, I had the exact same question. So I
Yeah,
had to-
okay. Brian, are you?
Well,
are you
I
making a
guess
motion?
in light of, maybe I'm a little confused, different memberships or different levels or different amounts. I mean, if there's going to be a different way to approach this because of the level of membership, I'll probably reserve to do anything until I get more clarity.
Jared?
As a general comment, if it truly is that we can't get the policy, like the policy
Yeah, it wouldn't
subscriptions,
matter.
which are model policies, if we can't get that without the full-blown subscription, then, I
It's
mean, it's
moot
an
issue.
all or nothing kind of
Okay.
thing. But I want to reinforce, just like all the other representatives and administrators that have talked about their policies, this is really for us to be able to model our policies that are ever-changing all the time because of laws. And this is an efficiency way of, so that we don't have to look at Nashua or Manchester or Londonderry to try and find out what they did, because they have the policy and us try to mimic it. So I think this is just another situation that we've already heard from the board, and I just wanted to, again, verbalize that.
Brian?
Was there a comment?
No, I had a comment only because sometimes when there's a motion like this, there's an unintended consequence. So the unintended consequence of the New Hampshire School Boards Association, yes, the policy one, and Jared, beautiful how you explained it. The other one is legal. So we can contact the New Hampshire School Boards Association attorney in a very similar fashion that the town can call up the New Hampshire Municipal Association attorney. And we do that. It can cost, $250 to $350 an hour to call our attorney on an issue, and it's part of our overall collective membership of being part of that. So the unintended consequence is that if you did do this, then we're going to have more legal expenses. So just recognize that.
And Scott, I'm not under any delusion that this motion is going to pass if Brian makes it, so.
No, I get, no, I think it's important, I mean, I think it's important just to
Confidence.
explain
I don't know,
that.
I'm reading the room. There's a lot of motion.
Well, you know what's coming.
Yes, I do. Go ahead.
Do you have a comment, Brian?
Yeah, I would just share that I understand the concern around the lobbying, but I mentioned at the beginning, we have almost 400 policies. We need to make sure our policies are legally compliant, that they're done correctly, and you need the School Boards Association to do that. So while I understand what Mr. Mazur is saying with respect to the lobbying elements of it, it is mission critical for us to have these policies, to make sure that our policies are legal. We will put ourselves in more legal hot water if we don't have it, and we do get free legal advice as part of this subscription.
Brian?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And before I make my motion, again, I want to repeat, I'm not dismissing the value that these associations bring based upon policy and legal support. Again, out of principle, I don't think it's a great idea, and wish there's a better way to fund it versus taxpayer money. But I think if it's taxpayer money used for public purposes, that's where it stops. It should not be used, regardless if it's a certain percentage, it should not be used for any kind of lobbying or advocacy, because that lobbyist or that advocacy group is actually furthering an interest for specific groups. It's not for the entire community. So that's where I wrestle with. So I make a motion to strike, where was it? Reference line 250 from $6,150 down to 0.
Okay, is there a second to that? I'll second it, yeah. Okay, so other discussion from what Brian Balke already spoke. Allison?
I just have a general question, like, probably for Brian or maybe for Scott, but and this goes across all the dues that Brian is so worried about the lobbying, are you guys going to be probably looking for another person who can start helping with writing up the things that they already helped with? Meaning, you were part of this organization, you get you said legal fees will end up having to go up. And if that legislation goes through and we're not ever allowed to be part of an organization that's lobbying anymore, then some of the town departments mentioned that literally they're watching, 900 bills. we're going to have to find somebody or hire somebody now to do that instead of paying a $500 subscription or dues fee because state reps think it's a bad idea. Are you guys going to run into a similar thing? We're going to now have to start paying more for legal expenses and more for someone to start watching potential bills. Do they do bills for you guys too? Is that kind of the lobbying part?
Yeah, so if the subscription is cut, we would need to engage with our attorney on every single policy and pay them to write and review every single policy.
So it seems
So
like that kind
will
of
that
bites us in the
cost
butt.
5 times as much? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just want to make that
Yep.
outwardly clear.
Although I understand Brian's point about the philosophy of it, there's a point where it comes in where it just makes a whole lot of sense, and it's going to cost taxpayers money if we don't do it. So that's what I wrestle with, and that's why I'm going to be voting against it. And I'd also like to move the question. Mr. Chair.
I'm not going to allow that. I think we're almost done talking about it. And voting on moving the question is going to cost more time. All right, so the motion on the floor is reference line 250-10000-2311-008-101, striking that line from $6,150 to 0. If you're in favor of Brian's motion, please raise your hand now. Okay, and if you're opposed, raise your hand. Samantha Kearns, Olivia Welcherdell, Doug Pounds, Elizabeth DeBrule, Jared Talbot, Frank Hobbs, Israel Carey, Peter Gregorikakis, Laura Stevens, Allison DeCesare, Richard Manzo, Mark Raynaud in opposition. Any abstentions? Kelly Boyer abstains. So motion fails 2 to 12 to 1. Yes, okay. All right, anything else for the school budget?
One last thing.
Samantha?
On line 231, for school board stipends, I know that that's the secretary minute maker, or minute taker. Why is there an increase in that line?
So
We're
that
on
one-
page 9.
Yeah, so that one specifically is Ms. Moran, who is our administrative assistant, who takes all the notes for all of our meetings. We're increasing that because our meetings have been running longer, not necessarily from the school board, but also the subcommittees. So she's taking the notes for the curriculum coordinator. No, those are ones that are not actually out on GTV, so it's important that we have those notes recorded so that the public has a transparency of what's being discussed during those subcommittees as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Why was that, Jared?
That was reference line 231.
231.
Sorry, 230, yeah.
Yeah,
231.
231.
Peter?
When we voted on this a few nights ago, or at our last school meeting, a few people voiced their concerns after we had already voted to remove this line. And I think it's worth revisiting based off of what I think in particular Sam had said in regards to the school trip at the high school. And I would like to motion to revisit that line.
Were you on the prevailing side?
I was.
Okay. Can you tell me what the reference line?
I cannot. I'd have to actually
I
ask
can.
Scott if he could pull it up.
Yeah, just give me 1 second and I'll,
You don't ask me to repeat what I said.
I don't know.
This is so long.
towards the end of the.
Yeah, it's at the end.
It's 1767.
Page?
68.
All right, so Peter, your motion would be a motion to reconsider. So if I'm 1768,
1768, page 68.
1767.
Third from the bottom. 67.
Oh. So
Oh,
if I
sorry,
hear you
1767.
correctly, Peter, you're making a motion to add $8,700 to that line. You're making a motion to reconsider
Yes.
the motion to cut.
Yep.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
Does second have to be on the,
I believe the only person that has to second it, right, Richard? Is the one who makes the motion has to be the one on the prevailing side. Second by Olivia. Any discussion on reconsidering the physics day field trip? Cut. Okay, so for the committee, if you vote yes, we're going to revisit the cut on physics day field trip. If you vote no, we are not going to revisit it. Does everybody understand how they're voting? Just want to make sure. All right, so if you are in favor of Peter's motion to reconsider the physics day field trip, please raise your hand now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, if you are opposed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Any abstentions? Richard Manzo abstains. So the motion passes 8 to 6 to 1. So now we are on the motion. What motion you need to do is to add $8,700 back into that line for the physics day field trip.
Okay. I
Peter.
motion to, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Chair. I motion to add back the $8,700 to the physics educational trip on line 1767.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Laura Stevens. Discussion on this?
Can you speak?
Richard?
Yeah, I'm just curious what the concerns voiced after the fact were, if there were any new concerns.
I mean, I could just speak to like where I was at that particular moment.
Sure.
So I know that different people around the table had different reasonings. And I know my reasoning stemmed from something that I used to, the way I saw budgets in my last tenure was essentially, if I see something that someone isn't willing to spend money on, right, where they have like a default or whatever, and they haven't put that forward, then if I'm gonna be looking at cuts, that's gonna be the type of thing I'm gonna look to cut, because you've potentially shown me, okay, you're not necessarily valuing that. That said, and so that was kind of the reasoning why I could go into it, where it wasn't because like kids needed to fundraise, like that was explained. In fact, the whole fundraising question I thought was answered very well by the school when they said, we don't want to have anyone think that this isn't like something that you are, have a right to because you're actually part of this educational practice. So I got that. Again, it all came down to, well, the school made a decision not to spend money on this in a year that they could have moved money. That said, here at our board, I heard a lot of people being like, well, wait, you're cutting this, but like, what about all of these other things that we're spending our money on that are quote-unquote extracurricular? And I just felt like this one thing where I'm like, okay, yeah, this makes sense mathematically, shouldn't be the reason I'm deciding this. So that's why I'm revisiting.
Okay, any further discussion? I feel like we talked about this enough, right? Anyways, so the motion is by Peter Gregorkakis to add reference line 1767, 10305, 2490, 18811, add $8,700 to that line. If you're in favor of Peter's motion, raise your hand now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you're opposed to the motion, raise your hand. Okay, Samantha Kearns, Doug Pounds, Brian Mazer, Joe Alexander, Frank Hobbs, Is Carey, Richard Manzo, Mark Raynaud opposed. Any abstentions? Kelly Boyer, Elizabeth DeBrule. So the motion fails. So the line is still cut. All right. Any other motions for the school budget? We're not saying like no to future, but this is pretty much it. Laura?
I have a question.
Sure.
And I think I might have asked this or mentioned it when we talked about the field trip last time. Is why this field trip and why are we paying for everyone to play sports and go to sports? I'm not saying I'm in favor of cutting that, but I'm just curious. That's a lot of money, but nobody mentioned that at all. And that's extracurricular, where this is a learning physics field trip. I just am curious about that.
Well, Laura, respectfully, I feel like we've already hashed it out. We've already voted on this multiple times. I'd like to move on, if that's okay. We've already talked about this.
We haven't talked about the question I just asked. If nobody wants to speak to it, that's fine, but don't be like that.
So-
I'm allowed to ask.
I guess I would, so I can tell you why. I know that like I talked to Peter about this line in particular. When I look at, now that we've done the town budget as well, I realize that they are two separate budgets. I personally don't think we are I want us to cut the town budget more, obviously. I don't think we are going to get it to a point that some people are going to be comfortable with. And so I voted against adding this back in because it's one tax bill for the, the resident, right? So maybe if one side is a little bit lower, it's okay that the other budget is a little bit higher, right? Even though they're two separate warrant articles.
Sure.
I think that we can, as a group, we can sell it that way, right? I think the other response, to your question of why are we paying for, everybody to play sports, is that those sports are, anyone can play them. If you're choosing not to take advantage of it, there's not like a cap in the amount of teams that you can have. I'm sure that there is caps on varsity, JV, but if they have enough players, they move to club organizations. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. And the same thing goes with clubs, right? Everyone is welcome, whereas this is specific to a class. You have to take this class. It is a very large pool of people, but if you're not taking a science class, you're not going. So I think that would be the other way to look at it too.
Jared?
I'll defer for now.
Peter?
I don't know if this matters at all, but I'm wondering if it's a point of order. The 8,700 was new, so when we had voted, we actually didn't vote to bring that down to zero initially, that line. I'm not sure if that matters since it didn't pass, but I just wanted to bring that up.
I said to add 8,700 to that line. I believe that was.
Is that what we said?
That was how I said it.
I thought we
was
said
to add
something
in
about bringing it
for
back
that
from zero or
purpose.
something. So I just wanted to make sure we had that down
Okay,
correctly.
so this field trip has been considered and reconsidered, so now I'm gonna call on Mark Reno to talk about village.
Through you, Mr. Chair. This is about the school.
Okay, all right.
So hopefully I'll finish it up. Just give me the 3 minutes if I can. Just looking at numbers, looking at the difference between our current default budget and our default budget for next year, it is an increase of 2.44% of $1,288,000. Looking at the difference between next year's proposed and next year's default, it's a difference of $259,765, and that was before the cuts that were made today. So that is a total increase for the proposed of 2.93%. We've talked about this budget particularly for multiple times. We've had our administration come in. I'd like to make a motion to restrict reconsideration of the school board budget until public hearing, to allow us to focus on what needs to be done, knowing that we've looked at this and I think we've cut as much as we need to until public hearing.
Okay, so there's a motion by Jared, is there a second?
I'll second, because I have a question, and we can't discuss, right?
Sure.
Okay. So I just want to clarify, so my concern is if we do that, and there is no chance if someone has something else that they kind of come up with between now and then that could positively affect it in a way so that it has more likely a chance to pass. I'm not exactly sure what the scenario would be, but does that make sense? Whether you agree or not, does that make sense?
So, because the question was directed at me.
Because you
Yeah.
made the motion.
No, I appreciate that, and thank you for the question. So, we've talked about it, our administrators have come, we've provided all information that we can. Could there be additional aha moments that an individual has? Absolutely. But I think that we need to acknowledge that our administrators have come, and if there are additional questions that we can't actually look at the line items and understand, we're gonna have to bring them back, and I wanna be cognizant of their time. But this isn't precluding us from not talking about it during public session and making additional changes at that point. So that's the important thing. This isn't gonna lock us into deliberative and say what it is. It's allowing our administrators and knowing that we're talking 2.93%, which I think was below the goal that most people wanted. So, kind of saying, our administrators, don't come back. Let's focus on what we need to move forward.
Thank you.
So before I have a concern with the budget committee tying our hands. Like, I understand what you're saying, but I feel like if this motion passes, then if we wanted to add something to the budget, we couldn't do that until after the public hearing. And I think that
At the public hearing.
after the public weighs in. So I have no intention of looking right back at this budget until we look through the town, but I want the option to have access to the budget after. So we're tying our hands. Frank? Oh, sorry, and then Peter, my bad. Go ahead.
Yeah, real short, I agree with what Joe said. I think the flexibility is important. I don't plan on diving back into it, but I think it's important to maintain that flexibility option.
Peter?
Okay. This is only because it's Jared, and I think he's the man.
I also.
Jared, I feel like you just showed that you're worth every dollar that the school board's not going to pay you.
Was that a compliment?
Okay.
That's a compliment. I'm not sure.
That's good.
Any other discussion on this motion? There's a motion and a second, Doug?
Yeah, just a quick, that only means what's on this paper here. The CIP stuff is separate. We could treat that separately, okay, all right.
Brian?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I won't be supporting this motion just because in light of what we discussed tonight and who presented, I'm still digesting everything. And there may be some future conversations, potentially motions. I'm not sure yet. I'm still wrestling and digesting things. So I would like to have the flexibility to revisit it.
Is that a question?
I'm ready to call the vote. What's the question?
No, my question is that, does the budget committee have a deadline of when they plan to move the school and town budgets to public hearing? And I say that for my partner in crime in the back, staff has to, historically, I have put together the public hearing, that PowerPoint on behalf of the chair, and that takes time as well, because you need to have final numbers, to do that. So I need to, personally, like Derek and I, we have end-of-year financials, so we have to close out certain things. The town that's their fiscal year, which is crazier. Ours is a calendar year, but, I don't take the week of Christmas off in its entirety because I can't. So I need to plan my work schedule knowing that I gotta prep for your public hearing.
So we have a meeting scheduled for 12/17 and 12/19.
Okay, and you would know by would it be?
That's my goal, but
Okay, so the goal would be 12/19.
we have until January, I believe, 9th.
The last day to hold a public hearing on the annual budget
14th.
is the 21st.
But
Oh, but
I
the
understand,
Right,
I
and I
understand
guess,
what you're saying.
have
We
you
have 2
set-
more meetings scheduled, right?
Right,
as of
have
right
you
now.
set the date of your
I
public
have not.
hearing?
Or have we?
I don't believe that you have.
Okay, so that's still. All right, so at this point, are we ready to vote? All right, all those in favor of Jared's motion to move the school budget to public hearing, please raise your hand now. Those opposed? Samantha Kearns, Olivia Welch Earl, Doug Pounds, Brian Mazer, Joe Alexander, Frank Hobbs, Iz Carey, Peter Gregorkakis, Laura Stevens, Allison DeCesare, Richard Manzo, Mark Reno. 1 to 13, abstentions, 1 to 13 to 1. All right. Mark, you're up. Hopefully quick, but.
Are we good?
Yes. Where did I put it? That's
Okay.
my question. You would all be in favor.
All right, so Mark had handed around the Goffstown Village Water Precinct budget earlier this evening. So, Mark, I'm going to give you a couple minutes maybe just to talk about notable increases and answer questions.
I'll make it real quick.
Okay.
So I'm on page 1, the budget income. I just have a few comments on the following pages too. The first item, 3402, water charges. There is going to be an increase 2025 over 2024. And then just at the bottom, subtotal and total, that has increased as well, but a lot of that is due from the well system.
Pardon me,
We're-
Mark, would you
Speak
mind
up a little bit.
grabbing a
Oh,
microphone?
I'm sorry about that.
Thank you.
Well, that's for the public, but if you could speak up, I can't hear you.
So on the subtotal and the total, you can see there's an increase there too, but a lot of that is due to the well system grant. And then I'm going to move on to page 2, which is the budget expenses. A lot of the expenses have remained the same. Some of them have decreased. Most of the increases are line items 4130 executive, 4150 financial administration, and 4150 personal administration. And as you can see, like I said, some of the items have remained the same, some have decreased. And really, that's all I have.
Jared, go ahead.
Thank you. For 4130, your executive salaries, that increase of 10.3%, are there any union employees that you have for? No, so this is, that 10.3 is for non-union individuals?
It's non-union, correct.
Are you guys consistent, Kelly, are they consistent with what your compensation plan, or is that a different?
I don't know if they adjusted. I don't think they were, I don't know that they were included. I'd have to double check.
Yeah, I would be curious too to know if your salaries were consistent with the non-union compensation plan we have across the town.
I can find that out, I'm not
That'd be
sure.
great.
If I may.
Derek.
Derek,
Derek's
were
here
they
too.
included in the compensation analysis that we did? I don't know if they made adjustments. but-
Derek Horn, Town Administrator. The Water Precinct is a separate political subdivision. They were not involved with our compensation analysis.
Okay.
I did say that, just so you know.
Samantha?
I just had a question on that first page, the 3409 new services.
Yep.
That is like a pretty steep decrease. Why, how did it drop so much? I mean, I guess, are there just less new services?
Yeah,
That's
there
the
is
decrease.
less new services. A lot of it had to do with the project at the, right downtown, the apartments.
Mhm.
A lot of that came in last year, 2024. I mean, in 2024. And then the project on Bog Road, the apartments there, we had a lot of income, or a lot of revenue from the new services there, so. And presently for 2025, we don't foresee a lot of it.
Peter and then Kelly.
You had mentioned back again on 3409 that the big part of the increase was the well system grant. Can you remind me, like, so we're talking about grant revenue here as well then?
Correct, yes.
So this is just like what you're spending? That's the cost, but then there's offsetting revenue, is that correct? Is it fully one-to-one?
This is, you're talking about the well grant?
Yeah.
So, yep. So this is a grant from the state that was given to us. We're looking into upgrading the 2 existing wells behind our office. And this covers the cost of doing that research and whatever we need for engineering and items like that.
Oh, so this is just the cost, and then there is some sort of offsetting grant. And I guess that's what I was trying to find. Where is it?
It's on the last page. It says well treatment system, I assume, because it's the exact same amount, 968,000.
Thank you.
968,000.
Perfect, okay.
I was going to say, can I provide some assistance? On their revenue sheet, they actually have 2 grant lines right above 3351, one for 1 million and one for 100.
3 of them, right, and 40,000
Yeah, there's
also?
so there's, so they've got the grants there that offset.
Thank you.
Other question? Oh, Kelly.
Do you have any increases coming to your customers this year?
That, I believe, is in the page 1, 3402 water charges. There has been an increase in water fees, yes.
Okay. Other questions for Mark?
What percentage is that increase?
I believe it is roughly 17%.
17% in
Yeah.
1 year.
Yep.
That's a lot. Are you guys doing annual reviews of your water charges?
Yes, yes, we do, yeah.
So this isn't playing catch-up from past years? Why is it going up so much in 1 year?
It's, I mean, a lot of it is, I mean, we don't get our money due from taxes. Obviously, it's water charges and ratepayer fees is how we get our money. And also, we're looking at a 3, 4, 5-year plan down the road as to where we need to be with our water fees and water charges.
So, I'm sorry, I don't quite understand that answer. So that's still a big jump. Are you saying that your water charges were too low?
That is probably part of it. I know we've had a lot of conversations due to that, and maybe a little bit is some kind of catch-up, and
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Brian. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, Mark, I think to piggyback on Elizabeth, if you can maybe get back to us and articulate further what is driving that 17% increase?
Yep.
That'd be helpful.
I can do that.
And I also want to know, how many customers are you servicing?
Roughly, we have roughly 1,500 services.
Okay. Thank you.
So, Mark, if you could just email Catherine that information, and then she'll
Yep.
send it to the committee.
Yep.
That'd be great. Anyone else? So we can also revisit this later as well.
Well, I'm just, because I'm trying to remember from the sheet of paper I got from the precinct, they were doing or they're changing over their pumps and they're getting grants and things like that. I think a lot of it, if we look at the well treatment system, there's a new spend of roughly $1 million there that I think needs to be offset because this is their own fund of expenses versus income. That's why I think the increases happened is because of that well rehab that they're doing for $1 million.
Yes, that is correct, yeah.
So I think that was, at least that was the literature I received in the mail from them as one of their subscribers.
So there's no offsetting grant? I thought that was.
I thought that was fully offset.
4901.
Yeah, this is almost $1 million.
Derek was shaking his head at me, so I don't.
I thought it was 100% offset.
Sorry
Yeah,
again,
me too.
on page 1, about 3351, they have a well system grant of $968,000 on their revenue. On the
Okay,
income
so that's
side.
offset. Oh.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess my concern is with this, I mean, and look, full disclosure, I am a customer, I'm on town water. You know, I don't know, 7 years ago, the water, long before you, Mark, the water precinct realized that they had not raised anybody's rates in a long time, and we had a 68% increase in 1 year, which I really fought, and everybody else in the budget committee said, well, it's not taxes, so we don't care. It's like, well, you know what? We still have to pay that. The people who live there still have to pay that. So, at the time, I mean, it was bad enough, but I was like, all right, well, at least we're caught up. Well, now there's a 17%. I mean, if this was a 17% tax increase, everybody would be losing their minds. So this worries me that now it's happened again, which is why I'm just concerned. I mean, is the water precinct actually staying current with their charges? Are we catching up? And if we catch up, are we gonna stay caught up with small incremental charges that are appropriate to inflation and more manageable for people?
Okay.
Mark, so we're looking for a little more depth about the history of the charges, when the increases happened, things like that, so that we can kind of have a better idea of what the logic behind the 17% was.
Sure.
Kelly, then Peter.
Mark, do you happen to know when this was ran? I'm just looking at the year-to-date, which is really far behind, so I'm just curious. Do you know when this year-to-date was run?
Year-to-date, this is, as far as I know, this is up to November.
Okay, and you guys do your budgeting till when?
Excuse me?
Do you know what your budget year is?
It's till the end of this month, December.
Okay, so okay. So you think this is your year-to-date 2024 is 681,000, that's,
Yeah,
you think
year
that
to-
number's accurate?
Yeah, year-to-date would be current, right, so.
I guess I feel like we should probably revisit that question of the salaries. I maybe want to know a little bit more information of how, if it's not following some sort of compensation scale that we were going on, what was the reasoning behind the large jump from one year to the next? If we could find some more information.
Yep.
Would you be able to do that?
Yep, that's 4150, right?
340.
4130.
4130.
4130.
Yep. Allison?
I'm looking at the ARPA dam grant. Looks like you budgeted $1 million in 2024 and in 2025. Was that expected to be in both, or because you didn't get it in 2024?
I think
Expected it in 2025?
we haven't used it yet, so I think it just rolled. We haven't used it in 2024, so it got moved into 2025.
Laura?
Thank you. I'm still unclear about the year-to-date. How it's so, and maybe I just don't know how it works. But the total,
Well, that's kind of, I think that's piggybacking on what I said. They didn't use the grant, so they didn't get the grant.
Oh, so
those
that's what's
numbers,
affecting
yeah, I
its
think,
way
I'm
off.
trying to figure that out, but
I
I
believe
think
maybe if
that's it.
the
Yeah, we
$1
didn't
million
use the
was supposed to be
grant in
$1 million more
2024.
spent.
Right, so
So it's
this,
slid
Okay,
into
it just doesn't
2024.
see this
the
dam
same.
rehab
Yes.
is only 55, and that's why, because they actually expect to do it.
Gotcha,
I think.
okay, thank you. Yeah.
But even
Brian?
the,
Hold on, Brian?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question, and I don't know anything about these grants, but with the ARPA, since it hasn't been leveraged or used, is there a statute of limitation on when you can use it?
As far as a grant, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, the ARPA grant in specific.
The ARPA grant for the dam, yeah, I think we have until 2026 to use that
Okay,
grant.
I believe
Yeah.
all ARPA funds need to be expended by 2020, the end of 2026.
Thank you.
Samantha?
so I'm still confused about the year-to-date. Not so much on the income side, but on the spending side. I mean, I know Kelly pointed this out, but if this year-to-date, unless there's just a bunch of bills they haven't paid yet, but this.
Samantha, that's what I was saying, though, it's because they didn't do the grant in '24.
Right.
They didn't do the funds either, so they didn't get they didn't bring in the income, so they didn't do the expenses. So if you look at under 4901, the dam rehab line on the last page.
Yes.
See how it says DM rehab should have been 1.1 million, and they only spent 55,000?
Okay.
So that's a huge swing there, and they're going to do it in '25 instead.
Correct.
Okay.
But that's why your year-to-date expenses are so low. Had they done that grant, you would have added another 1.1 million there. Or
And then I just have one other question too. Under 4335 electric, I know you budgeted 66,000 for 2024. You've only spent a little over 34,000. I know you're dropping that in 2025. Would you entertain dropping that more?
Which line item is that? I'm sorry.
So it's under 4335, electric.
Okay.
You're budgeting for 61, and I think you could go lower.
Okay.
I think you,
I would just ask, because there's, I'm sorry to interrupt,
Go
but
ahead.
I just want to give them the chance to clarify when the year-to-date was run, because if they have bills that are like, every 6 months or
Yeah.
quarterly, I don't know how their billing function works for electricity. I have a feeling there's some end of the year bills that will probably change this number. If we could just wait, because I don't know.
yeah, I mean, I would definitely be willing to, I guess, if it turns out that this is accurate, I think that maybe you guys should entertain reducing it. If we find out at deliberative session that like these are real, like accurate numbers, maybe they've gone up like a teeny bit more, I guess I would just think that maybe you guys could meet to reduce that 61 to like 50.
Okay.
Okay, so let me gauge where the committee's at. Personally, I don't think we're going to be done on Tuesday. Do you think that we can finish a budget by the end of Tuesday's meeting?
Well,
So-
we still have DPW, so
And we
probably
have
not.
DPW, yeah. So Tuesday, DPW, and then we can go into some town deliberations. I'm gonna give Mark a full week. So Mark, do you wanna come back next Thursday and give us all these, I'll give you a week to figure out those answers?
Yep.
So we're definitely meeting these two meetings, just heads up, for deliberation purposes. Anything else for new business? No new business? All right, there's public comment section. Is there anyone here for public comment? Come on up.
Hello.
Hello.
Shannon Carey, 16 Gorham Pond Road. I'm sorry. So, I'm sorry I'm late. I had a son who had a chorus concert, so not the one here at his charter school. So, first off, to Laura Stevens' disdain for the Dean of Students conversation. When I checked names on the ballot box in March, I checked boxes of people I knew would take both the school and town budget line by line and understand what that money represented. As Brian, you pointed out, were we getting our bang for our buck? So, I'm sorry, Laura, but 100% that conversation was in the purview of the budget committee. To know what our tax dollars are going to, what these dollars amount represents, is what we're asking you to do. People elect members of the budget committee not to advocate for departments, not to advocate for town employees or teachers. They elect you all to advocate for them, for their tax dollars. There's several people on this committee that are doing that, and I appreciate that. But there are several people on this committee that are doing nothing but advocating for spending the money. To Brian Mazur's Department of Education information, few of you have said, we haven't thrown money at the problem. In my opinion, that's all that we've done. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. Well, we have never cut the school budget once. We haven't. I know our superintendent likes to blame the state, blame EFA families, blame special education families. But the fact of the matter is, there are schools doing it for less. My daughter is a junior here at GHS, and my son is in 8th grade at the Founders Academy Charter School. Yes, the charter schools do it for $9,400. All they get is state adequacy. I know Brian Bulkey likes to point out, they get way more in state aid than we do. That's all that they get. They get no other property tax dollars. Yet my 8th grader is doing the same math work and doing the same ELA work my junior at this school is doing. So to say that we can't do it for less and have better outcomes is wrong. We can. Finally, on the town side, I'd like to state that in the past few months of watching all these budget meetings at home, I've seen discussions with people online, as well as in person, about over a dozen, that have stated they have either moved or they're in the process of getting their home ready to sell because they can no longer afford to live here. So for me and my home, I will not be supporting a budget that is a 12.4% increase on the town side. I think it's 13% total. So on the town side, I can already tell you right now where you guys are at. I'm not supporting it, and I know a mountain of people who won't support it either, so.
Thank you. Anyone else here? Jack?
Jack Carbonell, 35 Shirley Park, Goffstown. Lifelong resident. Proud of my town, proud of the amenities my town has. I don't believe this budget committee, some of the things that happens here and what is said outside of the purview of it. As far as for the funding, first off, charter schools, they don't educate every student in the district. They pick and choose who they're gonna educate. Here, we educate every student to the best of that student's ability. The IEPs, the 504s are legal documents. That comes with a cost. So when you wanna just take money and put it against results, you also have to look at the fact that all those students with IEPs and severely special needs students are all put into that average also. It's not just the cream of the crop or the people that we selected to go to our school. That is part of why those numbers fluctuate. So Coincidence does not equal causality, right? So just because you say we spent more and our grades went down, we must not be doing what we can with our money. That's absolutely not true, especially if you didn't put in that factor, right? The potential of the students that you have to educate, right? And that's nowhere in those numbers. Not to mention those numbers were pulled out of somewhere, not passed around, right? So I disagree with that. And I'm disappointed at the way that it was looked at and spoken to about the people that I think are doing God's work in the school system. And as far as constituents, there's as many constituents in this town who want to see this money spent, who want to see our schools. I don't want adequate education. I want more than adequate education, right? That's something that we're getting for less money than the state average. It's undeniable if you want to go with coincidence and causality, right? Then we shouldn't have a pool because I don't use it. We should get rid of the tennis courts because I never use those. Need the pool either. I live on the lake, right? It's got to be a realistic thing for why people are moving here. You can say there's a few people that are moving out. There's people moving in. It's going both ways, and they're moving in because of what the town offers, right? And to say that it doesn't have to do with state funding, I'm not saying it's all about state funding, but to say that the state hasn't downshifted costs to the town, to the property taxes, that's false, right? So your existential argument that you're having is how we fund this, right? How we fund this is determined by state reps, so we ask why it always goes back to the state, because that's part of how the funding is happening. And like I said the other night, when I sat over there, if you want to argue about property tax being regressive as compared to income tax or sales tax or interest and dividends tax or some other broad-based tax, that argument could be had, but there's nothing this committee can do to change that, right? It does happen in who we vote in the state. And then I'll finish by saying, if you're not for public education, which I would hope that everyone here is for public education, but I don't believe that that is true. Nothing said here, or no amount of cutting the budget or adding to the budget is probably going to change your stance on that. Thank you.
Can I just correct one thing, Joe?
You've
Charter
already- hold on.
schools have kids with
Shannon.
IEPs and 504s.
Shannon,
Just saying.
you've had the opportunity to speak. Allison?
Can we respond slightly?
Sure.
Because I just wanted to mention that both of my boys went to a charter school before this current school year, and now they've joined the middle school. So I've seen kind of both worlds, and yeah, they can do actually, and I will also note that I do the bookkeeping for that other school, so I've seen the finances. I'm sure they can do it cheaper, but I will tell you, I had to drive them to and from school every single day. I had to, there was no cafeteria, there was no option for them to buy lunch, so I had to take care of that. There was literally no extracurricular activity that you didn't write a check for if you wanted your child to participate, and really there wasn't much of that either. There were no sports teams. So the type of education you get in a public school of this size and the expansive things my son did a play this past weekend in the middle school and choral club. We didn't have any of that when I went to a charter school. And all of those things cost money. So if we'd like to be Goffstown, the school system that has literally no extracurricular activities, all you want to do is teach classes, then hey, Scott, you want to let us know what we could wipe from the budget if we got rid of everything that's extracurricular? Because I'm sure that would save us a ton of money, I would guess. But what kind of school system do we then have? Is that what we want Goffstown to be? It's not what I want Goffstown to be. It's not why I came here.
Thank you. So is there another member of the public that wishes to speak?
I'll make it real quick.
Go ahead.
I made my points about budget and
Introduce
finance
yourself
earlier.
again.
What's
Street
that?
number.
Okay, Henry Guyson, Amoskeag Drive, Goffstown. I made my point about budgets and money earlier today. I'd like to make a different point with you guys. I am offended on behalf of, for this entire elected body, that a professional who is supposed to be at that level of professionalism would interrupt multiple of the people's elected representatives when they're speaking. That is an unelected employee of the highest level of professionalism, and I am offended on your behalf that they thought it was okay to interrupt people in the middle of your discussion. In the future, I would remind somebody like that that you are the people's elected representatives, not the unelected employee making $50,000 more than the governor.
Thank you, Henry. All right, anyone else? Okay, at this time, I'm going to close public comment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Olivia, second by Laura. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed, abstentions? We're adjourned at 9:03 PM.